So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've had confirmation the live stream has started. Before we start the meeting, I'll go to each councillor present in turn to confirm they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on so that you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. I will begin with Cabinet members. Councillor Felicity Norman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here and can see.
Thank you. Yep. Councillor Chowns.
Thank you. I can hear and see you.
Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. I can hear and see you.
Councillor Harvey.
See and hear you.
Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
And Cabinet Support Members, Councillor Jenny Bartlett.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Ginman.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can hear and see you.
Councillor Selden.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader, with sound and vision.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can hear and see you.
Thank you. Turning now to group leaders and scrutiny chairs. Councillor James.
I can see and hear you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lester.
Thank you. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Matthews.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Councillor Gandhi.
I can see and hear you, Leader.
And Councillor Swindlehurst has sent her apologies. Are there any others in attendance, such as vice chairs? Okay, we also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. Thank you. I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. If any attendee loses connection and it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable period of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of Cabinet members remains able to hear and proceed the proceedings and be heard. Voting will be undertaken electronically using the voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only Cabinet members may vote. In the event that electronic voting is not possible to use or there is a technical failure, I will ask each Cabinet member by means of a roll call to indicate if they are for, against or are abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes of the meeting where there is a requirement to do so. If a Cabinet member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Just by way of introduction, we're obviously still in the midst of this COVID crisis. It's having a very widespread effect. Quite clearly, people's families affected through death or just not being able to be with loved ones. It's having a mental effect on people. We're very much aware of that, and it is a tremendous concern for us all. So we continue to urge everybody in the community to work together to get on top of this virus. We had a little bit of a bleep last week, I think, with an increased number in certain areas, and I do thank those of the community who got out to distribute leaflets in obviously a COVID safe way. The numbers have improved a little bit since then, but you will have seen this morning the government's announcement that we are in tier 2. I won't go into any detail as to what that means, but it's a little bit disappointing because we were doing very well. The only counties which are in Tier 1 are Cornwall and the Isle of Wight. I'd also mention, of course, we've had the spending review top line of that was yesterday. It's obviously important news for us as a council as we work out our budget for next year. We are going to have to make some difficult choices, even though the government are being moderately helpful towards us. We are going to have some difficult decisions, and consultation on that sort of thing will be starting next week. Also, in the context of this particular meeting, there's a lot on the agenda, a lot of very important things. It's interesting reflecting on the fact that we're spending quite a lot of time talking about a childcare issue, child protection, very important issue for us as a council. We're also looking forward to planning for the future, which is difficult in this time of COVID. We are looking at how we've done over the last 6 months financially. We're looking at injecting money in the economy from the LEP with town plan accelerated funding, and longer term we're looking at options for housing. So a lot of very important things, from looking at individuals and the concerns for people, children especially, down to accelerated funding and that kind of thing. So an important meeting, and we'll do our best to do justice to every single item on the agenda. So moving then to the formal items, first of all, apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
I've no apologies from members of Cabinet, Leader, and just the apologies from Councillor Swinglehurst that you already noted.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies? I'll move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? I hear none. So I move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on 29th of October. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask Cabinet members to confirm that they agree the minutes by an electronic vote. Non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room for a few moments. They will be automatically returned to the main room when all eligible votes have been cast. Please can non-voting attendees now be moved out of the main room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
Chair, there are 8 voting members and they may vote now.
Great, thank you. So we all know what to do now, I think. So submit our votes if we can.
Chair, those minutes have been unanimously accepted.
Thank you very much. Do my best to move on to the next item. So the next item, I'm going to move the agenda items a little bit if Councillor Hewitt is available. No, if Councillor Hewitt is on the screen. No, I don't see her. So we'll move to questions from members of the public.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
She is.
Councillor Hewitt, would you like to ask your supplemental question now, which will enable you to leave the meeting?
Thank you very much, David. My question's for Chris Baird, and thank you for the response which I had. So the response indicates that the paragraph 1.3 either has been removed or is being changed. And on the face of it, we might welcome the fact that, that the statement has been removed that no children were hurt or put at risk of harm, which was the thinnest of veneers over the evidence scattered in the body of this report. Apologies made, families affected welcomed forward, and admission that records were not properly kept. So the fact of the matter are lost in a trickle of obscurity. Taking the statement out begs the question, can we say that during this period, children were properly safeguarded? And I don't mean, were we compliant with the lack of advice from the DfE at the time? I mean, were we compliant under Human Rights and Equalities Act law? Can we say that children were properly safeguarded in the event of peer-on-peer sexual abuse? And if we have taken this statement out, that no children were hurt or put at risk of harm, what can we say instead of this period?
I guess for the monitoring officer, is this a question addressed to Chris Baird or to Councillor Norman?
It'll be for the Cabinet Member.
Right, thank you, Councillor Hewitt. I think it's clear from the proposed amendment to 1.3 that we can do everything possible ensuring that the right advice is given and that schools are aware of every step that should be taken. But I think we have to be clear that there will be occasions when it is simply impossible to protect that child from bullying or from inadvertent citing, possibly even contact. I think we must ensure that every possible step is made, but other than having an officer on almost permanent patrol in a school, it may well be difficult to manage to completely reassure people on that one. That is my view. It may be that officers can add to that. That is my view, that we can do a great deal and will indeed do a great deal. I think we have a great deal in our report, which makes it clear what we're doing, why and how we're doing it. But in the last resort, it would not be honest to say that in every single instance we can achieve that.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. We'll be further discussing this, I'm sure, when we come on to the discussion over the substantive report. Thank you. I'll now turn to questions from members of the public. And we have the first question. So for question one, I guess just going back to the screens. So for question one was Miss A. Thomas. I take it there's no supplemental question from her?
That's correct, Leader. No supplementary question has been received.
Right, and question two, name and address supplied. There is a supplemental question which you have put up on the screen. Do you want to read that out?
I will do, Leader. So the supplemental question in relation to question two is as follows. The families who have complained about the quality of the advice being issued by the council on peer-on-peer abuse have done so not to keep their own children safe, but to prevent other children suffering the same harm as their children did. They deeply regret that officers and the Cabinet Member have not listened to them on several key points. For example, in August 2020, one of the families went to a meeting in Plough Lane to discuss the draft of the second version of this report. The family member repeated concerns already expressed in June, namely that the officer's definition of appropriate safeguarding advice is inadequate in law and would not keep a child safe. The family member also pointed out that a review which is about the safeguarding of children, which does not report on whether or not children were kept safe, is meaningless. Officers and the Cabinet Member are well aware that in at least one case, the failure to separate the victim from the perpetrator effectively resulted in the victim having to leave the school. To go ahead and publish a report which claimed until last night that no children were put or left at risk is at best insensitive and at worst looks like an attempt at cover-up. The family members who received so much praise at Children and Young Persons Scrutiny for their long-standing efforts to raise awareness of the risk to children from poor safeguarding practices have lost all faith in working with the current Director of Children's Services and the current Cabinet Member for Children. A process of reconciliation starts with clear explanations and accountability. Should the families now give up on expecting that from this administration?
Thank you for that, Councillor Norman.
Thank you. I understand the dismay and unhappiness with what was put into point 1.3. I hope very much that when we come to the revised version of that, if it's accepted or if it's adapted, that will at least help to develop a bit more reassurance, a bit more certainty about what we are going to do and what we accept as our responsibility. So I appreciate the unhappiness with the way things are, but I would ask that you look at what we plan to do and how we want to take this forward, and that you judge us on what we do as far as that is concerned.
Thank you. The next question is from Miss E. Rogers. Is there a supplemental question?
There is, Leader. Thank you for your response, but your answer talks only in general terms about what needs to be taken into account in cases of peer-on-peer abuse and does not focus at all on the outcomes for the 28 victims in this report. Specifically, it does not tell us whether the actions taken by the council and school after the victims made their disclosure were sufficient to keep them safe and whether they were able to continue their education in school. Has this report missed the point?
Councillor Norman.
Thank you. It is clear that that information isn't there. I think we have to remember this is looking at historic matters. The decision was made not to actually contact children and families directly. This was looking at records and going back to ensure that what we were aware of through those records, that the schools were able to reinforce this. So we have not spoken to families. So it is a good point. It is a matter of concern, but the report was not able to do this. So I don't think it has actually missed the point. And just to add to that, I think we have learned, among many other things, from this whole process, that the effect on young people and their families, children and their families, is ongoing, and that we need to find ways of supporting them even well beyond the actual occasion and the time that they're probably in school as well.
Thank you. Ms. J. Liddell, do we have a supplemental question?
Yes, we do. Since Chris Baird was Director of Children's Services when the CSO report was published in April 2017, can the Cabinet simply ask him the question today? Why did officers choose not to share the lessons learned from the CSO report and the pro forma risk assessment with schools to ensure that the same safeguarding mistakes were not repeated? He will surely have been reflecting on this point since the question was raised at scrutiny in September. 10 weeks after that meeting, it is not unreasonable to ask him for an answer.
Regrettably, I've lost part of my internet connection. This is a question for Councillor Norman again?
Yes, thank you for that question. I would point people to one of the recommendations, I'm sorry I can't locate which one it is, which specifically commits us to an independent review of what actually did happen to the CSO report, how it was used or not, and that is something we will be looking into. I'm not sure I can add any more to that. Again, it is historic matters, but there will be a full review of that by an independent person.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Moving on to the next question, which is from Mrs. Wegg-Prosser.
Yes, Mrs. Wegg-Prosser does not have any supplementary question, Leader.
Thank you. Ms. B. Shaw.
Ms Shaw's supplementary question is, I welcome your acknowledgement that the use of alleged victim will worsen the feelings of victims. I welcome your apology. I am pleased that you seem to accept that the lack of a conclusive outcome does not mean that there is no victim. You say that you will ensure that the description victim is used in all documentation going forward. I am unclear whether that includes this review. If you accept that it is right to use victim in future documents, will you agree that logically and to ensure consistency and fair treatment, the terminology will also be changed in the current document?
Councillor Norman.
Well, I would certainly be very happy for it to be changed. I think that is what we should do. And I would perhaps check with Claire Ward whether we're actually able to do that literally. But yes, I would certainly feel that we should be doing that. We absolutely see that it should be the wording used.
Thank you for that. The next is an anonymous question. Do we have a supplemental?
We do, Leader. The Cabinet says it is committed to listening to families affected by peer-on-peer sexual abuse, but after a year of dialogue with Cabinet members, family members still do not have answers to simple questions, such as why the recommendations from the CSO report were not shared, why the learning from the Human Rights Act Equality Act case have still not been shared with schools, and why requests in early 2019 for an urgent review of all cases were turned down. How much longer will families have to wait for answers?
Thank you for the question. As far on the CSO report, I would refer you to the previous answer, which is that we will be looking into that and we'll have an independent review of that particular situation. My understanding is that the learning from the Human Rights and Equality Act case have been shared with schools through different mediums. I would need to get the fine detail of that, excuse me, to possibly clarify that absolutely, but that is my understanding. And the request for an urgent review of all cases, well, I'm not quite sure what is meant by that, but if it is what we have been doing in this review, then that is what it is, this particular report that we're going to be looking at. But if that is not sufficient, I can elaborate on the answer in a written answer.
Thank you. Ms. C. Trumper, do we have a supplemental question?
Yes, we do. Ms. Trumper's supplementary question. Thank you for your response, but it is crystal clear from paragraph 2.23 of the review of peer-on-peer abuse cases that the case in question is either not included in the review at all, or the information provided in paragraph 2.23 is inaccurate. Can officers please explain why they can't include accurate information about police convictions in a report about peer-on-peer sexual abuse when they are willing to share information about cases where there is no conviction or a case is still pending?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure about how we answer this. I believe that this is because it is still confidential, but I would need to have that confirmed for me, whether Claire Ward is able to add to that or whether we need to reply to that one in writing. I'm not quite sure, but I believe that is the issue.
And finally, Mr. A. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers has a supplementary question. My question asks whether written guidance has been issued to schools to help head teachers manage a very specific risk, the risk associated with having an alleged or convicted sex offender in school alongside other students. As I stated in my question, there are some difficult legal issues for head teachers to manage in these situations, and clear written guidance is needed to help manage the risks. Please can you clarify, have you issued written guidance to schools about managing the risk of having an alleged or convicted sex offender in school?
Councillor Norman, yeah. You're on mute at the moment, Councillor Norman.
Thanks. Thank you for the question, and clearly a very important point point you've raised, and very important for head teachers and those managing these situations. I understand this is the case, but again, given that this is so important, I would like to absolutely check on that and give you a written answer to that. But yes, I am fairly sure that is the case.
Thank you. A bit of a marathon session there for you, Felicity, Councillor Norman. All very serious questions, which I think will inform the debate which we're about to have on the peer-on-peer report. So I think we'll move on. We've dealt with item 5. We'll go to item 6, which is to receive the outcomes of the review, to agree recommendations, and to approve the executive response to the Scrutiny Committee's recommendations on the report, and to approve the peer-on-peer model guidance for Herefordshire schools. The item begins on page 19 of the agenda pack. A supplemental document has also been published for this item, which relates to 1.3, which is the subject of some discussion, which of the questions which we've had this afternoon. This review has been going on for some time and is in depth. The other slight amendment which we might make to the report is in item 2 of the report, the list of recommendations, which will refer to the review being appointed by Andrew Lovegrove, being an independent review from an independent third party. I think perhaps I won't say any more. I'll lead it for you, the cabinet member, Felicity Norman, to introduce it, and then probably Kerry Morgan, and then we'll have discussion and questions from the cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. In introducing this report, I would like to repeat the apology that I made at an earlier scrutiny meeting last year on behalf of the Council. Mistakes have been made in the past. I think we all recognise that, and it's certainly coming out in the questions and in the report itself. And our processes have not always supported children, families and schools as well as they should have done. And I do regret this very much. We are committed to strengthening our support, guidance and engagement with families, schools and partners to do all we can to protect children from further harm. We will continue to develop our approach to this, including through learning from good practice elsewhere. Words that we've used one way or another at different times, but I do believe this report is a very genuine and very detailed attempt to address the concerns that there are. It is complex and it is in different parts, so I will simply hand over to Kerry and thank him initially for all the work that he has put into this. It has been complex and it has been lengthy. So over to you, Kerry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you, Felicity. Good afternoon, Leader. Can you hear me, folks? Can I check, please, before I continue? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I'd like just to quickly recap on the narrative, the storyline, if it will, about this report. It has been around a while, and I'm aware that a lot of you know a lot of the detail as to why, but for the benefit of others, a quick recap might help. The initial request was around about Christmas last year, 2019. It was quite specific. The terms of reference for the review were quite specific. It was to look back into the historic records in MASH and to see what could have been improved, what did or didn't go right. And the terms of reference were limited to, in terms of what could be gleaned, if it will, by looking at those records. So it wasn't an open investigation into all things peer-on-peer, as it was. It was quite restrained in that regard. But the findings were quite clear. It was that the record keeping in MASH wasn't as detailed or as precise as it could have been. But it was from those records that I drew the conclusions of this report. And I think that still retains some integrity in it. And it says it could and should have been better. And with hindsight, what we did in the early years as a council could have been different. But actually, the second report, the one we're talking about now, I first started to share it with people around about May time, and I want to talk about that in a minute, a little bit more. But of course, in the interim, I've been able to talk to a range of stakeholders, both within and beyond the council, in much greater detail. So I know things, for example, now about what could be included on the MASH records and what is not allowed to be included on the MASH record, which sits with people for their lifetime, potentially. And other people I've talked to are national experts in the field. Now, I'm no national expert, but in talking to these people, you learn quite a lot about the context here. And the story they paint nationally is particularly bleak. There is a growth in peer-on-peer sexual abuse. It's not easy to pin down national data on this, and that's one of the problems. And the reasons behind the growth are a complex blend of things, I'm told, including simple things like changes to relationships at an earlier age, easy access to pornography, and mobile phones with cameras generating a spike in incidents, for example. The report does mention all that. It also says that bluntly, girls are more likely to be victims and they don't easily disclose, especially to teachers, that they've been victims. So there's much more depth and detail to that, but it is complex and it's hugely sensitive. The contact I've had has come from across the spectrum, including talking with victims, some inside the county and some out, and their families. And I have to say that since May or June, what I've not been expecting but has happened is that I've had contact from a much wider field than I expected. All of that has been welcome, and I've tried hard to listen to everything that people have said. I have spoken with some victims and families, I would say occasionally rather than frequently, but I've listened to them as best I can. So the draft report, this draft report was criticised as being sort of incomplete last time, and it has been amended, and I know a lot of people have contributed to those amendments. And the comments and the requests to edit and change and amend them became quite frequent. All of them are welcome. Not all of them easily accommodated, because some of them were slightly contradictory, really. Some of them I just couldn't understand my weakness. I was asked to change the national guidance in 2016 at one point, which puzzled me. But some of it, all of it betrayed a commitment, if you like, to improving things in the future. But it became complex to accommodate it within the report without it becoming a corporate report rather than an individual report. With one exception, every time I spoke with a victim or their families, I always took account of their views as best I could, given the terms of reference. They were always perceptive, they were always reasoned and measured, and they were always painful to hear, actually, when they started to speak to me. So I have always tried to accommodate their views, and I will always continue to do so. So my view now is that the report has retained its integrity. Given the terms of reference, given that we were looking at the historic records in MASH, it still does that, and what it produced are based on those. It does acknowledge the weaknesses in the early days, but I also tried to offer a bit more. I also tried to offer a route into some forward look, which wasn't technically within the terms of reference, but seemed a sensible thing to try and do. So I think the findings are defensible, if not complete, would be what I'd say. There are some things I was expecting comments on which I've not received, one of which I, for example, alluded to in the report, which is actually, there's a temptation to see this as peculiarly a schools thing only, and yet all the experts I've spoken to have said, don't park it as a schools issue. Schools are just one of the stakeholders in this, and it's a much more wider, complex, contextualized safeguarding issue. And the one reference to something in the report which hasn't been commented on by others is actually the role of the police in peer-on-peer sexual abuse and the formalising of their investigations. The report draws attention to the fact that actually there is no time limit on investigations for good reason. And that means there's no time limit on closing a case sometimes. And that remains an issue of the national. I'm not criticising the police in any way here. I'm criticising the systems in which they have to operate, because the lack of a national structure to support families can take a long, long time. That's one of the recommendations is, can we start to influence policy nationally to put some structure around that? My thinking there was, if we are to influence national policy beyond Herefordshire, we thereby protect more children more quickly. So that's why I've written into it references to working with Ofsted, whose data is remarkably weak on this, and working with the Department for Education, which is what we've done. It retains the status of draft report, I think, at the moment, I believe, which means the recommendations I put in my 11 remain as draft as well, but I have continued to progress them. And I think that was the right thing to do. So, for example, we have appointed a safeguarding officer. We have produced a model guidance policy, which we're sharing with schools. We have got partnerships with University of Bedfordshire and other expert organisations. We have started the work with Ofsted and the DFE. It is early days because some of the timelines there are quite lengthy. So I think what I cannot do is, within the terms of reference, change much more now in this review. So I think probably, and what I can't do today is discuss individual cases in any great detail. And the reason I can't is because we have a danger then of identification, which is problematic, hugely dangerous for the families concerned. So it is what it is now. My view is that it has retained its integrity in terms of what the original brief was. It has flaws, as any lengthy report does, in terms of some of the vocabulary, but I think the meanings are clear there. I will be pleased to continue the work that I've started here. It doesn't end with this. And one specific about the process of reconciliation, which was my attempt to offer a door to the future here. I've received quite a lot of comment on that from people who want me to map out the process, which I've resisted doing. And the reason I've resisted doing it is because that process doesn't exist anywhere else that I know of and will change from case to case. And I think the assumption being made by some of the correspondence I've had is that the statement belongs to the council. And the report doesn't say that and has never said that. The statement could easily belong to a victim or a family. So it was an offer to hear the views, which I now know families and victims want more than anything else, in without being too cliched, in a safe space. So there isn't a process. There is an offer of a conversation with people who've experienced this. And I'm put in mind of a phone call I took. It's nothing to do with Herefordshire, but it puts where I'm coming from in context, I think. From a victim. The victim doesn't live locally, had somehow phoned me out of the blue. I don't know this person, and it was an anonymous call. But the victim was over 60 years old, and they were describing their own childhood experiences. And it was a very sobering phone call, I have to say. So one of the things that person made clear was how long it had taken that person to come to terms with what had happened to them, and how dangerous it would be if I spoke in public about it. So I'm trying hard not to give any clues away here. But in the context of phone calls like that, you realise that a review is only one step along the road here. And that's why I've tried to put in the reconciliation paragraph, which I'm keen is somehow retained, because that to me is an opportunity for families and victims to have their voices heard if they feel that they haven't been already. So thank you for that. That's the context from me, folks. I'm happy to hand it back to you for discussion and debate now. And I'll do what I can to listen to your views and take account of them afterwards. Thank you, Leader.
Carrie, thank you. It's obvious you have developed it's not quite the right word, but a passion for this, a passion for putting something in place so that it doesn't happen in the future. And it's very interesting that you highlight that an incident which must have taken place 40 years ago for that individual has had an effect over the whole of their life. I think in society, I think we're beginning to realise that and the mental health effect on these victims. So thank you for that introduction. So I'll now move to any questions from the Cabinet. I'm sure there are questions. Councillor Davis first, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kerry, for that honest and open introduction, really, for me. And I hope it shows that this is just a start for us as Cabinet of sorting out this area that there is national lack of guidance on. So I've got a few questions around it. So Felicity, feel free, Councillor Nora, feel free to pass to officers or yourself, whoever's best to answer. Really happy first of all that we were discussing equalities, because we know that peer-on-peer abuse has a disproportionate effect on young females. So one of the questions that I've got is whether or not anything has had to be changed within the document that we're asked to approve, the guidance, to ensure that we're reaching those groups, so that has anything had to be done to ensure that we're reaching those groups, or things to be done in a different way? That's the first question.
Is that for me, Councillor?
Yes, I think so, Carrie. For you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor. One of the partners we've been working with is the University of Bedfordshire, who have acquired a kind of reputation for national expertise in this area. They're talking to us about the model guidance that we're issuing to schools in the near future. And the reason it hasn't been issued is because we're waiting for their final approval on it. Actually, one of the things they're suggesting is that it does mention more strongly the balance of the sexual imbalance, if you like, as the girls being more victims than boys here. I haven't seen the detail of it, to be honest, now yet, because it still sits with them at the minute for comment. But I'm expecting them to say that actually we need to strengthen advice we give as to the preventative identification around girls, and girls are of a certain age. And I'm not prepared to say which age yet because they haven't told me, but I imagine they're going to say from age of about 12 onwards. But I haven't had it back yet in full detail from them. So that will go in once we get it.
Okay. I would ask then that when that happens, if we can do an equality impact assessment to make sure that we've looked at what kind of impact it might have, and to make sure that that guidance mitigates against those risks. So if we could do that. One question that I still can't get through from the report is, can you advise me at this exact moment in time now, what guidance is being used in schools in Herefordshire with regards to the peer-on-peer abuse? And does it include the September 2019 amendments as well? Because we've heard much about the June 2020 amendments, but not the September 2019. So could you advise me what is being used by schools and by ourselves?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance was revised in June 2020, as you know. That actually largely rests on the September 19 guidance. There were some changes, but not many. So all schools have got that. Interestingly, in addition to that, there's been all sorts of conferences and additional guidance that's been issued, including training sessions. When I spoke with Ofsted about this last week, actually, their data set is particularly weak, I have to say, in as much as they only log occasional incidents that happen to come up on an inspection, and that's not a secure methodology, and they respond to written complaints. They tell me that Herefordshire is not an outlier here, that actually other local authority areas are, but they're not prepared to give me figures on that because they recognise the methodology is a bit flawed. But what they were prepared to say was that they thought the blend of guidance, training material, conferences and so on that had happened in the last 2 years was well above what you might get in other local authority areas. So I'm comfortable that that side of it is moving forward well. And I'm comfortable, actually, if that's the right word, it isn't really. I'm reasonably confident that schools know what's expected of them already. They will review their policies when we finally issue the model guidance that's still with the University of Bedfordshire again. We were hoping to do that before the end of this term, but that has been delayed by the other end, if that makes sense. So at the moment, it rests on a blend of all of that, but it does accommodate the September 19 guidance and the June 20 guidance collectively.
If we can, I know everybody's working flat out, but if we can expedite that as much as we can, I worked out from the figures that 28 cases in the 33-month review period is on average 0.85 victims, and the delay each month is adding that to potential offences being committed. So if we can expedite that as top priority, please. The one on page 87 has got the flow chart from within the guidance that we're going to do. And I'd really like us to, I know that we're talking, because this part of it is actually about things that we could potentially make changes to rather than the report itself. I would really prefer those where it says, when you're going through the flow chart and it'll say, we have listened to the to the victim. We have taken the allegation seriously. I would love it to say something more about the ownership and the voice of the child. So can we change that to things such as if we were to go back through it, it's a measurable outcome that we would ask a victim, did you feel that you were listened to? Did you feel that your claim was taken seriously? It's just a change in wording, but it's all about empowerment and listening to the victim. And I would very much like that to be incorporated within the flowchart. I've seen it used elsewhere, and I think it's a really hard hitting, and it allows people to take ownership of how they feel, and also a test for us to know if we're doing it right, rather than it just being our viewpoint. Yeah, we think we took it seriously. Actually asking the victim, did you feel like we took that seriously? How did you feel going through this process? So something around that, I would really appreciate being inside that guidance.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I agree with that. Actually, the flowchart itself, when we discussed it, the scrutiny panel, the flowchart wasn't ours. That is from the national guidance at the time, which is critical of. So what the decision was that we could add to that and generate our own local version of it. Yes, I accept that comment. Thank you.
And just finally, just one, and it's a question really, it's an open question. Suppose, how can I be assured that anything has changed for our children and young people with regard to safeguarding peer-on-peer related cases?
Well, I'm willing to say what Ofsted told me on the phone, but wouldn't put in writing, which is they've looked at their figures to say that Herefordshire is not an outlier. It's actually issuing more training and guidance, and more is in the pipeline because of the work of the new Education Safeguarding Officer than they would expect in other areas. They know their data's flawed, but they're comfortable with what we're doing, they say, in terms of preventative work in a way they don't see in some other local authority areas. Now, I'm not comfortable we've done as much as we can, only because there's always something extra you can do. I accept we're doing more than other local authority areas, but I don't want it to stop there. I'm hoping that reassures you that actually there's a continued emphasis on this. If you talk to school safeguarding leads, for example, they know exactly now what we're talking about and what they're expected to do. We're going to continue that audit in the new year when they've got the new model guidance. There's a slight caveat. Ofsted don't like model guidances. They say that the whole point of a guidance policy is you've got to implement it and process it yourself, which is correct. But when I said I don't think it's tenable not to do this now locally, I think we ought to do it, they accepted that as well. So they're willing to take account of the fact that a draft model guidance policy issued to all schools is acceptable, rather than something to be criticised come the day they start inspecting schools again. I'm hoping all of that reassures you that we're working on it hard. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, it does. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you.
Kerry, are we able to impose this guidance on schools, or are we limited in our ability to do that?
We're not able to impose any policy at school strictly, and some of them are academies, so we don't have any technical right to. But on this particular issue, I don't think there's a difficulty here. I think the schools would be hard pressed not to accept it as better than they would get from anywhere else. What I want to do is allow them time to review it and implement it thoughtfully in each individual school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chowns.
Thank you. Thank you, Kerry, for this report and for your verbal report as well, and for the hard work that's gone into it. And I also want to kind of acknowledge the efforts that have gone into pushing for action on this issue from families and victims. And I think it's, just to acknowledge the pain of this. And I am glad that we're making some progress, and I'm also glad to hear you acknowledge that, you know, we've never kind of done everything that needs to be done, and there remains more to be done. Personally, I take some reassurance from this large amount of material that things are better than they were, and that there is a commitment to further improvement. And I think your comments have made that clear. I recognise that the task of keeping every child safe at all times is very difficult, and more so these days, as you explained, and that indeed you know, the council and with our work with children in all sorts of dimensions, not just in this, we're struggling with the reality of, you know, a lot of children in difficult circumstances in a lot of different respects. I wanted to just make sure that we've clarified a couple of things. So there's clearly real concern about the wording of paragraph 1.3. I want to clarify, can we take that wording out and replace it with wording from the clarification, which doesn't say no children were put at risk. It says that, you know, according to the records that we've got, various actions were taken, but we acknowledge that, you know, totally avoiding risk is impossible to say. And the second one is that I think that we need more clarification in the report on the fact that there's going to be an independent look at questions on page 59, recommendation 2 from general scrutiny. You know, that text doesn't specify that it's an independent person, an external reviewer who's going to be looking at that. So can we clarify that we can change the report in that respect, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to look at those, Councillor. Thank you. I think that the supplementary clarification, which I think you've got, does have a look at the wording of paragraph 1.3. It does recommend a change, and I'm happy to comment on your second point about the independent look. I'll defer to the guidance from legal colleagues on that, but I've got no objection to that at all. Does that make sense? Having a look at those again. Does that make sense? I'm saying yes. I'll look at it.
So the wording in the supplement, it doesn't say this is a replacement for paragraph 1.3, and I think that and indeed it includes in the first sentence of the material the offending phrase about no children were left or put at risk. So that should be taken out and replaced. You know, the whole paragraph should be replaced with the text from the word according at the end of line 2, would be my suggestion.
I think Councillor Chance, Claire Ward may have some suggestions. I think we'll probably...
I was just going to assist, Leader. I'm taking a note of amendments. I believe Councillor Chance is seeking 2 amendments. One is to include the additional word independent into the executive response, recommendation 2 from scrutiny, and to replace in the report the section 1.3 to the clarification given in the supplementary. That's 2 amendments that I've got logged at the moment.
Given that this is a report from officers, what is the mechanism for the change?
It would be amendment that is being proposed by Councillor Chowns and then supported by a seconder.
Thank you.
Claire, I'll send you suggested text by email.
That's helpful, thank you.
Councillor Crockett, I think you were next, although your hand has disappeared. My fault, I think.
Yep, I think you've taken my hand down, but thank you. Yeah, thank you, Kerry, for this report. And I especially thank the families affected for their tolerance in this regard. It's been a long time. So this is in relation to Appendix 1 to the main report. Record keeping has been raised many times in the past. I understand that improvements have been made following identifying areas of concern. So I was looking at page 15/39, because there's 2 numbers on it. Recommendation 3.1 says, what could we have done differently? A number of recommendations with the varying times have been produced, and my question relates to item 1. Continue to improve the quality recording on Mosaic in peer-on-peer cases. A quarterly audit change to monthly audit was requested. These commenced in September 2020 by the newly appointed Education Safeguarding Officer. So the question is, I acknowledge this is early days, but has the officer reported any concerns during this revised audit procedure? And I appreciate she's not here at the moment, but I wondered if she'd reported anything to either Chris Baird or to you, Kerry.
I can answer that, Councillor. She has started the audits. She's reported no concerns to me, but I have yet to receive a written report on it, which is what I've asked for. That's recent. It's not her fault. She hasn't done it yet. I've only just asked her for it. But she's brought nothing to my attention that are of concerns. So I think the record keeping on Mosaic has improved. But I take the point behind your question, which is some kind of evidence to collate that is what you're seeking, really. Yeah.
Yes, please. That would be good. Thank you. And I also note I think it's good that we've got a newly appointed officer looking at that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Kerry. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is Section 47. In this report, it mentions Section 47 of the Children's Act 1988, which seems to suggest that responsibility for the welfare of children in an authority lies ultimately with the local authority, and not necessarily, and supersedes the authority of a school, whether it's an academy or otherwise. And perhaps, apart from superseding the criminal justice system, is the ultimate body who has responsibility for children. Can I just check that is correct? Because I know in the past there's been a sort of understanding by other people that perhaps if things happened at school, we as an authority are not responsible or not responsible in the same way. That's the first question. The second question, sort of related to that, is that I am concerned. I personally do not support academy schools, and I am concerned that academy schools are outside of our sphere of influence and control, and I'm concerned that we can't impose upon them conditions that we would want to impose to standardize good guidance, which is actually compulsory, not simply something which is advisory. And I wondered if we might be able to get all academies and all college and educational institutions in Herefordshire and request them to sign up to a voluntary code, but one that is binding. In other words, everyone signs up to it and everyone agrees that standardized guidance is adhered to. And the third one is that we write to Ofsted, which I know we're already doing, but we write formally using our MPs and whatever resources are also available to us to insist that Ofsted do capture this information, that they should require it from schools, because I presume schools will at least, even though it's ad hoc, be capturing this data, and that it is used in the evaluation of schools, because I know nothing worries school teachers more than a bad Ofsted report, and this is something that is probably the most crucial aspect of a child's young life. And with regard to that, I would also suggest that we see if there is a way, either through the guidance that we ask the schools to take on, if we can encourage schools or ask or request schools that they have a class. Every single school in Herefordshire, every educational institution in Herefordshire should have a class at some point, once a term, once a year, which explains to young people what abuse is, what their rights are, and explains to perhaps perpetrators or potential perpetrators that it is not correct to behave in the way from evidence that they're seeing, online and elsewhere. Something explicit, because I don't think that exists. And in the world we live in now, I think it needs to be explicit, and I think that guidance needs to come from the school.
Okay. Can I take them in order, Councillor? Thank you. The first point about the responsibility for safeguarding, it's my understanding that does sit with the local authority, actually, irrespective of whether a school is an academy or not. But I'm ready to be corrected by either my colleague Chris Baird or Claire Ward about that. But it's my understanding that the local authority does have that responsibility. The second point about the academy system, I take your point about the kind of fragmentation of the system there. Actually, academies are accountable on safeguarding fronts to an agency within the Department for Education called the Education and Skills Funding Agency, bizarrely. And they have a kind of annual audit with them. My intention really, when the conversations with the Department for Education happen, is that they do what you're suggesting for us, and they write to academies on this and say that they need to take account of this more thoroughly than they may have done in the past. Actually, within Herefordshire, we have a good relationship with our academies, and I don't anticipate any difficulty in getting them to accept any kind of modern guidance or policy that we offer. Indeed, They engage well with all the conferences and training sessions that we've run for them so far. But my intention was to get the DFE to do that. And then the third point about Ofsted, yes, we could write to Ofsted. I suspect I know their answer, which is that they're an inspection and a regulatory body, and therefore does sit with the Department for Education. But there's no harm in writing to them to say that they should capture this data more currently. And so for us having a class to deal with this, there is a new sex and relationships education curriculum that started in school, where it's meant to start in schools this September. The pandemic has put it back a little bit, if I'm honest, in terms of the implementation. And there's an element within that that does make reference to this, if I put it that way. So we could compose a letter to Ofsted, do that. We could use it. We could come via yourselves or from the MPs if you wish. My worry about that, I suppose, is that I don't want Ofsted to disengage with us if we're not too careful. At the moment, they are willing to engage with us. I think that's a good idea, if I'm honest. I do think the classes exist, but I've got no control over the quality of that conversation in the classroom, I suppose.
No, thank you, Kerry, and I appreciate that. And I think the point is that really we need to be putting the pressure on it. You know, I take the point about having good relationships with academies and Ofsted and everyone else, but critically, you know, there are flaws in the system at the moment, and unless we put pressure on, as we are able to do as an authority with our MPs and whoever else we can, you know, rope into it, then there is always going to be a sliding of what we would want. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to reiterate why I think this is important, folks, is if you can influence national policy, given the experiences in the county, you therefore protect more children in the future than if you don't. That's why it's important to us, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just thank you, Kerry, for your report. It's very interesting, actually, and I've had a difficult mindset how to deal with this report and the understanding of families of what they've all gone through, and it's been very difficult to make my thought process easier in making my recommendations. In terms of the model guidance, it does state that there are obviously sexual and relationship modules for children, but does it actually discuss or talk about the difference of peer-to-peer abuse for children to really understand how what behaviour is could lead to something else like peer-to-peer abuse? I'm just wondering whether that is a case that schools could bring along as well, just to highlight that this is serious in schools, and you know, young people should look out after each other as well and be able to report this.
Yeah. In terms of the model guidance, it is guidance. It's not a curriculum map, so it's meant to be kind of headline principles rather than what could be done within a school on a term by term or week by week basis, if that makes sense. We could. There is training being planned for the new year by Victoria Blackmore, who's the Education Safeguarding Officer. We can factor that in, if you like, so schools are even more aware of what they could do. We'll probably come at it through strengthening the sex and relationships education curriculum that it has been issued by the DFE, rather than through our model guidance, if that makes sense. The model guidance is what you do as much as anything to prevent or identify or react to incidents. But the sex and relationships education is the curriculum map. It's what's expected to be taught. That's probably a better route into getting schools to do it, I would suggest. But I'll take it away and talk to Victoria about it to see whether we can strengthen that in the training. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased that we've reached a point where we can agree some actions which address past errors and omissions, and to put some sustained processes and practices in place to take a continuous learning and improvement approach to how we proceed from this point onwards. Harmful sexualised behaviour in young people is clearly an increasing issue for our society, and we must do what we can to share the wider learning on this issue. I'm pleased to see that we are committing to consult and to work with subject matter experts in academia and working in the front line in the third sector in supporting victims of abuse. I'm conscious that the cases reported to the Council's multi-agency safeguarding hub equate to less than 10% of the abuse cases reported to third sector organisations by Herefordshire-based victims. And these reported cases are themselves only a fraction of the cases which actually occur. So we're only dealing with the tip of an iceberg. I've been hugely frustrated by the difficulty of the journey in getting this report and its appendices before us today. And I'm hugely grateful for the persistence and tenacity of the victims and their families who've been selfless in pursuing improvements in this council's processes and guidance. It's been a long and painful journey for them, to my view, longer and more painful than it could have been. And I would like to apologise to them all for this having been the case. I cannot fathom why it is that the council has been in possession of additional advice and guidance since 2017 on how to act to strengthen the safeguarding of victims of peer-on-peer abuse. And we have not passed that advice on in writing to all of our schools. Consequently, I welcome that we are conducting an independent review into these decisions. Had we promulgated this 2017 advice, this review would have been undertaken against a much higher benchmark on advice issued than has been the case. If schools are now going to receive robust and specific guidance on their duties under the Human Rights Act and the Equalities Act, I'm pleased to hear it. It is, in my view, deeply unfortunate that we have not done this sooner. I'm glad to hear proposals from colleagues for amendments to the report and additions to our response to the scrutiny recommendations. Given that at least 25% of the case records which were reviewed under this, this study were found to be incomplete, I really do struggle and would not be able to support the report were the wording of paragraph 1.3 to go forward unchanged. With 25% incomplete records, we simply cannot say with certainty that children have not been left in a position of risk. I hope that the changes that have been proposed will be supported by Cabinet colleagues, and that the recommendations that are made in this report to do things differently in the future can be approved so that we can strengthen how we provide advice and guidance to schools and can continue to learn from others and experts in their field as we try to tackle this really difficult and pernicious topic.
Thank you.
Terry, do you want to respond to that? You obviously haven't seen the proposed amendment.
Sorry, Leader, was that for me? I beg your pardon.
Yes, I appreciate you haven't seen the proposed amendment, but I wonder whether you wanted to comment.
No,
comments.
No, I recognise what she's saying, and I think I welcome what she's saying. I'm not sure there was an actual question there, but we are looking again at 1.3. I take the point about the proportion of incidents that actually get as far as MASH records, if that makes sense, which is bleak nationally. So yes, I think the intention is. I haven't seen the recommendations that you're talking about, but I take your comments. Thank you.
Councillor Crockett, are you going to have another?
Yeah, sorry, Leader. I'm just going on about this recording of information. I wonder if we could add a recommendation that the Children and Young People Scrutiny do a review into the barriers for recording accurate and contemporaneous records. Don't know whether anybody would support my recommendation.
Perhaps Councillor Gandy will address that in her in her summary at the end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think I'll move on to group leaders at this stage. Starting, I think, probably with Councillor Lester, if he can hear me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. The Conservative group notes the report. These are very serious issues, and we too would like to thank those parents for having the fortitude to persist with raising the matters so that the council could do this full review in the way that the council operates in giving advice and dealing with these issues. It's extremely important. We would also like to thank Councillor Gandy and all of the serving children's scrutiny members for reviewing the matters. And it indeed highlights, in our view, the importance of the scrutiny function. So we welcome the recommendations and we trust that they will be implemented in full. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go then alphabetical. Councillor Marsh and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. I feel that I'm the standing group leader, and our Councillor Chance has already put in our feelings of regret and relief that this is now moving on. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank the officer for his comprehensive report. And obviously an awful lot of work gone into it. Most of the points, 1.3, totally agree with everything's been said. The issue of academy has been addressed. That's the trouble with all these cabinet members going before you. They pick up all the points that you've noted. And also the parents for pursuing these issues, because if they don't pursue them, you know, things don't get improved. So our thanks to them. What I would like to raise, I also welcome the appointment of a safeguarding officer. I think that's well overdue, and I'm sure that'll be extremely valuable. Could I ask the officer, if an incident similar to this that happened in 1917 happened next week, would he be immediately informed? And could he tell us what other officers would be immediately informed, and would the cabinet member be immediately informed?
Yeah, the answer is I think yes. When I say I think, I'm choosing my words carefully so as not to identify anything. But I have been informed of a recent case. I was informed through contact with the school, and I was informed with contact through the MASH, and I believe cabinet member was informed as well, and other officers as well. The reason I mention that is because that did happen recently. It's being managed well by the school, and so I'm confident that we would know. The reason I'm sounding cautious is I'm trying hard not to lead anything that might identify what's happening live at the moment. But yes is the answer to your question. Yes, I would know, I believe. Yes, I know my officers would know. And yes, cabinet member and Chris Baird would know, my boss. And Chris knows of this because he's also we've communicated about it. So yeah, I'm saying yes is the answer.
I hope you can have sufficient information to answer this. In 2017, would the same procedures have been in place then? Or is that the reason why things, slip away a bit?
No, the procedures we now have weren't in place in 2017, but the procedures in place in 2017 were not out of kilter with what other places were doing. I think that's the narrative of the report, really, which is that what took place in 2016, 17, and into 2018 nationally was not strong enough. Is it stronger now? Well, I believe it to be stronger in Herefordshire than it is in many other places. That's not to say I think the job is done anywhere, actually. Does that make sense?
And just thirdly, Leader, I'm sorry to go on. The officer, working with partners, is the cooperation up to the standards that he would like, or is he concerned about some of the activities of other partners?
I think, no, the cooperation with other partners has always been good. The relationship's good, they're constructive, we listen to their advice. I would say that there are other partners we could probably use as we develop the work in the future as
Thank
well,
you.
once we use.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews and Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. Unfortunately, I have a long memory, and I remember back in 2012 that this authority received an inadequate Ofsted rating because of inconsistent and incomplete record keeping, and down to the forerunner to Mosaic, which was known as Framework I, and there was a whole lot of soul searching that went on then. To hear now that there are incomplete and inconsistent record keeping practices that were going on at that time during 2017 is quite disturbing, really. So I really welcome the independent review, which must look at all the way that all our social workers operate and the way that we relate to all the young people in this county, so that this can never ever happen again.
Yes, I think we've discussed that a little bit, Councillor Salton. We need to watch that. Kerry, were you going to comment on that as well?
No, only to say that the review did find that the practices in 2017, they are better now, if that offers any kind of reassurance. And between 2012 and 2017, I don't know the local context, but I do know that the national guidance around record keeping, it improved, but the guidance around what was required changed as well. So people were always in a catch-up mode. I'm confident that the records now being kept on MASH are better than they were in 2017. If that helps.
It is a very difficult issue, isn't it? Because we want social workers to be face-to-face as much as possible and not spending all their time doing records. I think we'd like 80% face-to-face and 20% in record keeping. Yeah. That's the ideal to work towards. So maybe more technological assistance. I don't know what the answer is, but I think if scrutiny were to look at that, that would be very good. Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Leader. I don't think there's a great deal to add. I think that I would like to thank Kerry for his report. The amount of debate that's gone on, the questions and forbearance of the parents of the children concerned. And I think it's really good that this debate has been exceptionally thorough, and that the Cabinet have looked into it very thoroughly. And I commend that this report is recommended. Thank you.
And Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Deja vu, Groundhog Day is that all I could think about. I agree with what Councillor Selden said about it, the fact that we seem to have been here time after time after time and nothing greatly changes. In 2011, I asked that we set up a scrutiny project to look at safeguarding and children's care. The then cabinet member and the director assured me there was nothing wrong within the department, and that it was unnecessary. What followed was within 12 months, the Ofsted had given a damning report on the council. Now we've gone on time after time in having reports, inquiries, fine words about how things are going to improve and how we're going to change things, and we're still where we are now. What can you say that will assure the children and the parents of those children that something is going to dramatically change in order to improve the situation? I realise there are problems, and one of the problems is the fact that we talk about being responsible, the council, for safeguarding as far as the academies and all the schools in the county, but we don't necessarily have the necessarily structure or powers in order to do something about it when we feel that the particular individual schools are not delivering on that particular in that particular area. So I hope things are going to change, but I'm still very skeptical.
Okay, well, we'll do our best to destroy that scepticism, Councillor James. So back now to the Cabinet. Do any of the Cabinet want to comment on any of those? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Gandy, Chair of Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank the Executive for accepting our recommendations, and on the occasions when they've only been partially accepted, I recognise the reasons behind that. I also like to welcome the recommendations that have come forward from the Executive as a result of their consideration of the report. However, I do want to reiterate what I said at the scrutiny meeting, that how angry myself and my committee were that information was withheld from us, and that not only that it brought about a delay in scrutiny coming forward with their recommendations, but it also resulted in myself giving misleading answers to public questions, something that I would never knowingly do. I therefore welcome the independent inquiry as to why the CSO report was withheld from scrutiny, and would ask that this inquiry reach its conclusions as soon as possible. I'm a little bit confused now because Councillor Selden seemed to give an impression that this independent review covers more than just the CSO, the delay in coming forward with the CSO report. So I'm now a bit flummoxed as to what the independent review is actually going to do. And I was somewhat surprised that when scrutiny considered the recommendation of the report, and we put forward a recommendation that the withholding of the CSO report, there be a review, that I only found out by sort of second, third hand that this had become an independent review. And I did feel that we were back where we were before, which was scrutiny not being kept in the loop as to what's going on. And I really do hope that following what has happened with regards to the CSO report, that we can be assured as a scrutiny committee and all scrutiny committees that this will not happen again, and that reports that should be available for scrutiny in order for scrutiny to do their job properly will be made available. I'd also be happy to discuss with my committee the recommendation by Councillor Crockett that the scrutiny look at the possible barriers to the recording process from Mosaic, because I can support the fact that this does not apply solely to this particular issue of peer-on-peer abuse. This is something which, although improving, is a problem across the directorate, and it has been something which has been raised both at scrutiny and performance challenge on a number of occasions. And so I welcome that recommendation, and we will consider it at our next scrutiny meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think we can probably move on with this. We have a suggested alternative
about the independent review and what it's reviewing.
Yeah, going to come on to that, Carol. Yeah. So we have, I think, some suggested wording to change 1.3. Then the question then is the extent of this independent review and exactly what that should include. At the moment, the independent review covers what happened with the CSO report, the role of the legal department in the human rights litigation, and the third element was the course by which the report to the peer-on-peer report, how that was managed from the time when I originally asked for it until its final delivery to the scrutiny committee. Those are the three elements that it's to be looked at, and I suppose it's a matter of whether that was what the appropriateness of all those actions were. Now, if there's a suggestion that it should go wider, then that would necessitate further discussions, I guess, with the person who's going to be appointed to do the work. Councillor Harvey, I don't know whether you have a particular view on how wide that investigation should be.
I think you've covered the key points. I think that's those areas are broad enough to cover the main areas of concern that certainly I've heard from Councillor Gandy, and we ourselves as concerns on cabinet.
Yes, I think my thought is it needs to be focused to get it done quickly. But my hope is that if the person who does the review, they come in and they have any extra concerns, that they will raise them with Andrew Lovegrove, who is the independent who hasn't been involved with this, who's doing the appointment, and he, I'm sure, would discuss that issue with me. So, Claire, are we in a position to come up with recommendations, and is everybody content with that? I think so.
Thank you, Leader. I've noted 4 recommendations, I believe. The first is from Councillor Norman, which is that all references to alleged victim is changed to victim. That's in relation to the public question. That would require a seconder.
I'm happy to second that.
And that's in relation to recommendation A. In relation to recommendation C, Councillor Chownes's proposal. Now, bear with me while I get the full text. Is in relation to recommendation 2 on the executive response, is to commission an investigation led by an independent person into the handling of advice given and received on peer-on-peer abuse since 2017, which will also provide an explanation regarding the circulation of the CSO report and template and why it was not mentioned at the Spotlight Review in 2019. That would need a seconder.
I think that wording might make it too wide for the moment. And it's independent but limited to the CSO report, so there's some additional wording in there. Claire.
Sorry, Claire. Yeah, we've mentioned several specific things, haven't we? So I was suggesting to commission an independent external review of why the CSO report and template, etc., which I think is text that's still already in there. And with another element, Liz, that you were picking up on from the conversation that needed to be included in that?
Yeah, I think the advice given and received was really just to include the legal to and fro, but if you think it's covered under reference, simple reference to the CSO report, we can condense it by that wording to just that then.
So therefore the suggested amendment is to commission an independent external review of why the CSO report and template was not circulated to schools in 2017 and why it was not mentioned at the Spotlight Review of 2019. That would need a seconder.
I'm happy to second that.
Seeing a nod from Carol, does that cover, is that good for you? Yeah.
Then the third amendment is Councillor Chownes in relation to the sentence in the report 1.3. Now, this is a difficult one because this is actually an officer's report. I believe what you'd be seeking to do would be to add to recommendation A your view that, and let me get the email, sorry. I just read this out, the review also investigated whether any children were put or left at risk. It found that according to the records held and cases under review, advice was given, including national guidance at the time, and was followed as far as was possible. Separation was made and the likelihood of risk was reduced. We are aware, however, that contact between children, including sight of perpetrators and also bullying, has taken place. With all due care being put in place, inadvertent contact remains possible, and the findings here do not preclude this. Even now, with every effort being made and detailed guidance being shared with schools, we cannot guarantee that contact between children might not inadvertently occur, however much care is taken. This includes outside of schools. We also acknowledge the harm has implications for social and mental health, potentially well into adulthood. That again would require a seconder. Councillor Norman, I think, seconding that. And my last amendment is to recommendation E, Councillor Crockett, which is a request that Children's and Young People Scrutiny review the barriers to record keeping for children's safeguarding. And that would also need a seconder.
I'll happily second that one.
Thank you, Leader.
Okay, so I'll put those to the vote. Do we just do with all four at the same time? Or five rather. The recommendations. A, the executive note the contents and recommendations set out in the peer-on-peer review MASH report appendix 1 as amended. B, the executive agree the recommendations set out in paragraph 3 of appendix 1. Again as amended. C, the executive approves the executive response to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee recommendation set out in appendix 5 as amended. I'm sorry, the part B is not amended, but C is amended, so I'll just reread that. The executive approves the executive response to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee recommendations as set out in appendix 5 as amended. D, the executive approves the peer-on-peer model guidance set out in appendix 6 for the use in all Herefordshire schools, and we'd ask that that's issued as soon as possible. And E, Claire, I don't have the wording for that.
That the Children and Young People Scrutiny review barriers to record keeping for children's safeguarding.
Thank you very much. Shall I go around the whole cabinet for vote? Just looking, Claire, at you, is that, or are we doing electronic?
I'm not sure what the clerk set up for this one. I'll just check.
So we are okay to use the electronic voting. There's just a generic statement on there to say that we agree the recommendations as the leader has just read out.
Thank you. So everybody will be moved out except the voting voters.
Okay, Chair, there are 8 voting members.
The voting slip will come up.
All votes have been unanimously approved, Chairman, or recommendations.
Thank you very much. Okay, so get everybody else back. Right, so we have another 4 items on the agenda, so I don't propose we have a break at this time, maybe after this next item, see if we can get through this. This is the delivery plan, sets out the priorities for the next 18 months. It would normally be in a delivery plan from May 2010 to April 2011, but because of the COVID crisis, it's been put back. It's taken an extraordinary amount of work. Thank you for the officers who put this together, particularly Donna Vickers, and also the enormous work by Cabinet members. It is ambitious. It will require communities to work together. I was tempted to read the opening statement on page 3, which I think encapsulates exactly what we're talking about. But you can all read that. The top priorities mentioned in the report are to deliver affordable homes. There's a paper about that a little bit later on in this meeting, so I think we're moving ahead with that. Digital connectivity. We had a briefing this morning about FasterShare, looking at progress on that. We want to create jobs with higher wages. That's, of course, influenced so much by the economy. If the government's projections are right about unemployment going up, it's going to be a difficult task, but something which we should work to try to minimise the effect of that. And related to the modern transport system, we have a cabinet decision, I think it's next week, on that. They all fit very well with central government statements about what they expect us to be doing. The Chancellor's statement talked about building houses, talked about money for infrastructure, and the need to create jobs and that kind of thing. So I think we are very much at one with the government. Those 4 objectives don't include things like concerns for child welfare specifically. Obviously, housing actually has an impact, and the jobs and payment for jobs, that has an impact on children's welfare. But that's, in a way, that's part of the day job, getting on with that. The amount of money which we spend on children and adults is so much a very big part of what we do, very much the day job, and certainly not forgotten. And there are some specific objectives within our plan about that. So that's by way of introduction. And I'm just wondering whether Donna Vickers, maybe I've stolen all your thunder, I don't know.
Pretty much, Leader, but no, thank you. I guess the only thing really to add from myself is how it sort of references the objectives set out in the county plan, which was approved by council back in February. That's where the reference numbers in the table, which is on page 7 or page 111 of the report, Pat. That's where the sort of, I guess, meat of the document in terms of the planned projects and initiatives over the next 18 months. But it's been very much a collaborative effort between officers and cabinet members to get us to this point. And as you say, it's an 18-month plan, which will be reported back on a quarterly basis through the quarterly performance and budget reports in terms of the progress against that. As you say, we've been buffered already this year by the pandemic, and that may still buffer us a bit over the next, particularly over the next 6 months. But this is the plan as we sort of set out today.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, huge thanks to Donna and all of the team of trying to sort out a whole group of people with different opinions and different stands on things. So I know it couldn't have been easy, but look at how good it looks now. So thank you to all of the hours that you've put in. So there's only one question. It's not really a question, it's more of a plea. When we talk about the equality duty, just to say, it says at 20, improving equality of opportunities, etc. And then it says individual projects will undergo equality impact assessments as an integral part of their planning and implementation. I would really like that to say prior to the project starting. So historically, we've done an equality impact assessment after projects are pretty much already laid down. So if you think about some of our infrastructure projects that we've done, we just need to think about Hereford Hightown and that infamous curb. Had an equality impact assessment been done at the beginning, that would have been designed into so that people who were frail didn't have those falls. So it's just a plea really, and I don't know whether it needs to be changed in the wording that they will undergo those equality impact assessments before any specific plans are undertaken. Thank you.
Okay. No, I think that's a good point. Apologies, Leader. There were some proposed amendments. I'm not sure when that gets raised.
Yes, yeah, thank you for reminding me. We'll do those right at the end of this part of the discussion. Yeah. Councillor Chowns.
I'd actually put my hand up to mention those proposed
Oh, well, let's go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, fine. Yeah.
I believe that Jeremy Milne has suggested a couple of amendments to John Harrington. And John, would you like to respond to those suggested amendments?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Milne suggested a couple of amendments a little bit late in the day, but it wasn't really his fault considering the timescales that we were under. Both very sensible. I'm reticent to commit them both to the delivery plan in the way that they're currently written, because we are currently going through a process of review of the core strategy. We also do not know the full implications of the Planning for the Future white paper. So what I propose is that, if I can just get the document up again, sorry. What I propose is that the recommendation, the proposal number 1, which says please add EC5, take appropriate action to ensure our historic environment data is up to date and the resources adequately stewarded. I wish to amend that to remove the last few words, which says and the resources adequately stewarded, because appropriate in a way encapsulates what needs to be done. And that is that's where I'd like to leave it until we understand the implications. The second amendment, I've spoken to Councillor Milne about that, and we've agreed that we will not progress that at this point. But of course, all of these things can be delivered outside of the delivery plan. It's just that if we want to put them into the delivery plan, we have to really consider the implications and consequences. So I'm happy for the first to go in amended, and I will discuss with Councillor Milne the other suggestion.
Okay. Well, it'd be convenient to move on. As a cabinet, we've been looking at this for some time, so I don't think we need to prolong the debate from our perspective. Going to the group leaders, again, alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Marsh, who probably is partly responsible for those suggested amendments. You're on mute at the moment, Trish.
Yes, no, I'm delighted that the delivery plan now does have explicit mentions of ecology. I know there's been a lot of discussion about ecology being as important as climate, and this delivery plan, as well as continuing the commitment to climate action, also now includes specific objectives towards strong stewardship of natural resources and to biodiversity at EN7, as well as one of the economic ones, which mentions about safeguarding heritage, culture and natural beauty. So it's very good to see those explicitly mentioned, and of course to welcome the works on the Y to reduce phosphates, which would of course help to protect the wildlife that is already so valuable, that is part of that SAC designation. So very pleased to see those in there. And I commend the enormous ambition of this plan, and I hope very much that we will be able to do it. I am worryingly aware, as we will find out in the next agenda item, of the many challenges we face as an authority, but I hope that we will be able to make strong progress on all the things in this excellent plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Then moving on to Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. I think of the 4 bullet points you've highlighted, Leader, I respectfully suggest the local economy should be top of the list. Secure, well-paid jobs are vital. If we haven't got a prosperous local economy for the well-being of the county, nothing happens. And I'd like to ask Councillor Harrington, if I may, that if in the near future the implementation of the preferred options in respect of the infrastructure plan are implemented and approved, does he agree with me that that programme then should be urgently progressed to get this county moving and to bring the jobs in that we so badly need, and to show our business people that we're behind them and support them, because some of them must be starting to think, have they got a better future elsewhere? It's time we got behind our business people and did everything we can to create jobs. So do you agree with me, Councillor Hardwick? It's imperative that we get our infrastructure policies, whatever is decided, in place as soon as possible.
John, I think that's for you, isn't it, John Harrington?
I think it's for JH Junior, that one. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Matthews, I entirely agree with that. Obviously, we've gone through well over a decade without resolving those issues, and I entirely agree that we will be moving forward with speed.
Thank you.
Leader, might I add?
Councillor Chance, your area is economy, isn't it, as well? So, yeah.
Indeed it is. And I'd just like to draw Councillor Matthews' attention. Thank him very much for his concern about economic regeneration and jobs. I absolutely share those concerns, and he'll note from the delivery plan that we've actually been very explicit about the measures that we're going to take to translate our ambitions into action on the ground, including not just the Towns Fund process for the city, but also work that we're driving forward ourselves in terms of market town economic development and employment. And additionally, there's an ambition in there to roll that work out to rural areas too, in addition to continued support to the enterprise zone. We've got specific work in there about providing support to businesses to help them bounce back from COVID, because as I'm sure he's well aware, we are not unique in Hereford in facing very significant economic impacts from the COVID crisis. Absolutely.
Councillor Chang, no criticism of you. I know how hard you've been working. I'm merely highlighting the point that it's vital that we get our economy moving, and I wish you all the best to get it done.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. I'm sure everyone in this room shares that sentiment. Yeah.
Councillor Selden.
Just to tie up the link between this and the county plan, thoroughly welcomed by us. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick.
Yeah, ditto from me, really. Excellent paper, a lot of work gone into it, and as already mentioned, there's going to be terrific pressure on our budget, so hopefully we can move forward with as much of this as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. The buzzword at the moment is levelling up. What work has been done in looking at the fact that a lot of these projects are based on the city? You know, there's been an awful lot of expenditure over the last 10, 12 years within the city and the immediately environment around the city. Very little has gone on in the market towns and the villages. So what has been done about that? Because I think that's very important. But also, as well as that, you know, we're entering a period of, well, an unknown period as far as the economy is concerned, and we talk about jobs. We're going to lose jobs in the county and in the country as a whole, and that the Chancellor says that, and it might be more than we actually think. Now, what's being done to actually safeguard that, our position? We're lucky in one respect that we have a lot of food-based industries in the county, which will perhaps weather the storm better than some other industries. But I am concerned of the fact that, you know, so much of the resources are going into the centre and not into the rest of the county.
Thank you, Councillor James. I think Councillor Chowns is championing the bit to respond to that one.
I'm more than happy to respond to that one. Councillor James, as I alluded to in my previous response, and as you will no doubt have noted from your careful reading of the delivery plan, we are very much focused on this agenda, which is why there are specific actions in the delivery plan about working with the market towns. And I know you've been involved directly in conversations about precisely that in Kington, looking to allocate £13 million that we have set aside in capital budgets for work on jobs and employment in market towns And as I've said, there's an additional element in there about economic development work in rural areas. 2 more points on levelling up. One, levelling up is also work that we are integrating into what we're doing within the city as well. I have absolutely championed that principle within the Stronger Towns fund work, and indeed it has been written into, not quite in that exact language, but written into our vision and the objectives for the Stronger Town work. There is very clear understanding that we've desperately got to do things about that. Actually, I've got 3 points. My second one is that, as you will see in the elements that refer to Kickstart and skills development and so forth, again, actions within the delivery plan, that is a key focus to ensure that we improve the level of skills in the county as a whole. Unfortunately, we're lower than the national average in terms of our average skills at the minute. We're determined to raise that, and I'll be reporting in detail, more detail on that in my contribution to the Leaders newsletter very shortly tonight. And the third thing to mention is that in terms of nurturing areas of the economy that have more potential, a very clear one of them is the tourism sector. In particular, given the impact of COVID on travel, we have more people travelling within the country, and we have secured £444,000 from the LEP to invest in that. Been a very super successful programme this year. That work will continue next year and is leading into development of a destination bid to encourage the development of the county as a whole as a destination for visitors. I'm very excited about that work, and again, that is a product of a commitment that this administration made in the last budget setting round, and you will see it referred to as item 5.1 on the delivery plan. So I assure you that there is a great deal of work going on that agenda precisely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lester.
Thank you. We would agree that there's, the Conservatives would agree that there's much in the plan that we are happy to support, and much of what's in the plan is an aspiration that any council would want for its citizens. I note the comments that have been made about spreading the wealth around the county, and that's crucial. The strapline in sustainability mentions Hereford, not Herefordshire. I trust that's a typo.
Which page is that, Councillor Lester?
It's on page 4 of the delivery plan, which is page 108 of the papers.
Clearly a typo.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for noticing
Thank
that.
you for spotting it.
Okay. I thought it was, and these things happen, but I think it's important to make the point in view of the points that have already been made. With regard to the top priorities, our view is that it should be about delivering homes in general, not just affordable homes. That's absolutely key for us. I understand the aspiration for affordable homes, but I think it's homes for all kinds of scenarios that must be supported, because we would really like to see growth in the right areas. With regard to improving digital connectivity, I don't know the exact figure, but we're mindful of the fact that with broadband connections, it's well over 90% anyway. So I think really the focus should be on those hard to reach places that we still haven't cracked yet. We absolutely agree it's about creating higher paid jobs, which is why we were keen on investing in the enterprise zone for Hereford and all of the economic growth that we were wishing to see. The plan refers to COVID, and I know that this is an initial delivery plan in the face of COVID, but I think we're of the view that it's important not to lose sight of the fact that COVID will be managed and not with us, and so that change won't have happened irrevocably over the time. So there will be a time when certain things return to normal, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. Under the issue about having industries closed down temporarily, and the report seems to insinuate, the plan, sorry, seems to insinuate that that was in some way a positive thing because it restricted travel. I would be very cautious of a plan that sees that in a positive light, and I think that if the plan is to in some way restrict travel or note the benefits of businesses being temporarily closed down, I think that is the wrong thing to highlight. And perhaps it's the way that the report is phrased, or sorry, the plan is phrased, but it could do with not insinuating that the temporary closure of businesses was a positive thing. We note that there's the focus on the options when it comes to having different modes of travel, and that's to be accepted. But our concern, and it's a concern that we will echo through all of the issues when we're talking about the budget, is that any plans have to be affordable and not impact negatively on the revenue requirements of the council. And this will be absolutely critical when needing to balance the budget. The plan wishes to create a modern and resilient transport network within the city and the county. The recent long-awaited transport review states that the transport package, which includes the Western Bypass, is forecast to provide the greatest congestion relief to the city and the greatest resilience for the transport network. And so our view is that any delivery plan that doesn't include a Western Bypass is hollow, and it won't achieve those aspirations that the plan wishes to achieve, and to provide that economic growth that Herefordshire desperately needs and deserves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. I think I'd just make an observation on the housing. Of course, our plans are for housing to be funded by the council. We need to encourage private enterprise to get on and do the rest of the building, and we're working, as you know, to try to help the problem in the catchment area of the River Lug in that context. Councillor Harvey, I don't know whether you wanted to comment specifically, and then Councillor Chowns.
Yes, I wanted to comment specifically on the importance of making sure that we can afford all of this. You're absolutely right, Councillor Lester, and alongside your detailed reading of the transport strategy review, I'm sure you've also picked up that the Western Relief Road option actually presents the lowest value for money of all of the options that are under consideration, and we do have to bear that in mind as well. So thank you for making sure that we're keeping our thoughts on the money.
Councillor Chowns.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. On Fastershire, absolutely, as you will have noted from the delivery plan, we've got a very explicit focus there on reaching those who have not yet been reached, particularly the last 3% that are not yet in plan. Very much appreciate the importance of doing that, and I would like to emphasise that we are doing particularly well relative to the national average already in rolling out full fibre. So this is something that we can be proud of in the county, as well as focusing on reaching those right at the end. Second point, this administration is also very much concerned about digital inclusion. So not just whether the wires are there to people's houses, but whether there might be other barriers preventing them from being able to make use of that connectivity, whether that be price or confidence or skills and so forth. And we're actively working on that too. And the last point, thank you for your close reading, Councillor Lester. On page 5, the penultimate bullet point, I entirely agree with you. I don't think that should be in there. And Donna Vickers, could you remove that, please, from the final version? Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll put this then recommendation to the vote. The recommendation is...
Sorry, Leader.
Yeah.
I just want to... There's just 2 amendments, so can I just make sure? We first got the one from Councillor Harrington, which is to add to EC 5.3 to take appropriate action to ensure our historic data is up to date. I'd need a seconder for that. Councillor Tyler, and then...
I think that's not quite the wording, Claire.
Councillor Harrington, do you know the wording?
It is precisely the wording agreed with Jeremy, Ellie. So
historic environment data is up to date. Is that what you said?
Historical
heritage, isn't it?
Heritage. Oh, heritage.
The wording
Historic.
the wording suggested by Jeremy Milne. Shall I read it out? And accepted by you, John.
Yeah, if Claire just rereads it, I'll tell you if it was. Claire, can you just reread it? Because I've just sent it to you verbatim.
Yeah, take appropriate action to ensure our historic data is up to date. That's what I've just written out.
Historic environment data.
Okay, well, that
historic. Yeah, no, it is. Sorry, it's my translation. Historic environment data is up to date. Apologies, Councillor Harrington.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you. Thank you both.
And then the second amendment is from Councillor Chowns, which is the typo on page 4 of the delivery plan that Hereford is changed to Herefordshire.
Clarification, I have two then, not just that one, but the removal of the penultimate bullet point on page 5, which mentions carbon in language that I would not agree with.
So we just need a seconder for those two amendments, please. Councillor Crockett, thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. So I'll put that to the Cabinet. Cabinet approves the delivery plan as set out in Appendix A with the amendments as recommended. We're going to the voting card again.
Doesn't everyone have to go and sit in another room or something, or is that not required?
Yes, I don't want.
It'll happen.
We have 8, do we, Jenny?
We have 8 indeed, and you may vote now. And those recommendations are unanimously accepted, Chairman.
Thank you.
David, are we going to have a quick break?
Yep, 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Come back at 16:38.
Too much coffee.
Yeah. Do I report back that was passed? Thank you. We're going to have a 5-minute break. It's now, according to my computer, 16:33. So we all start at
Okay.
Thank you and welcome back. Just waiting for 2 councillors to rejoin. Good. Well, we're back live. The next item is the Q2 budget and performance report. And I don't know whether you want to introduce this, Councillor Harvey, or go straight to Andrew Lovegrove.
Straight to Mr. Lovegrove, I think.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Harvey. As people have read in the report, that this is a very unusual situation, and I'm very conscious we're reporting to you a very large overspend, and that's for the reasons we've discussed about the COVID situation on there. As it says in the report, we have received funding from government, and since this report was written. We've received notification of a range of other funding streams, and even today, because of the announcements around which tier other funding streams are coming. So this is very much based on information at the end of Q2 on there with our best estimate of looking forward. So things are changing and we are keeping things under review, but I'm very conscious that we're reporting a very significant overspend on our revenue position.
Right. Any questions from Cabinet? Are you able at this time, Mr. Lilligrove, to report on the likely outcome at the year end, or is it still too early to do that?
Leader, I can give you my view. It is my view. It's based on the information that we are seeing there in front of us. I expect our position will be roughly where we're showing in the report there, we're showing about 15 million pound overspend with about 11.5, 12 million pounds worth of government funding for the COVID matters. So a potential overspend of around £2 million. But that is a worst case scenario. As you can imagine, the council and its officers are very focused on that. And we are getting further income, grants being announced by the government. As we mentioned in the report, we were invited by government to make a bid for lost income in the earlier part of the year around that, and that process is ongoing. I've received an email confirmation today that part of that has been awarded to us, and we're still waiting further information about the remainder. So it's a moving area very much in terms of the where we'll get to in terms of final outcome. Of course, we don't know what the future will hold in terms of what happens after this lockdown on the 3rd, in the run up to Christmas, and then obviously in the latter 3 months of the year going through there. We're very much in a similar position to every other council in England, that we are having to do an awful lot of things to support our communities, which comes at a cost. And I can report that the latest arrangements to make grants to businesses, for example, that is going well. We have been in contact with the businesses that are in scope, and they've reporting. I can report that they've been responding very promptly to the information requests and the confirmations, and grant payments are being made on a daily basis to those businesses. So we're doing everything we can to push that money into the business community as soon as possible.
Thank you. I just asked that question because if anybody from the public was to look at our accounts, they would take a deep breath and wonder what on earth we're doing. I think that gives us some comfort. Thank you very much. Are they Councillor Chowns?
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much. I know that yourself and your team are working your socks off to our finances in very difficult circumstances. Can you briefly confirm 3 things? Can you confirm that every effort is being made to control spending as far as possible within the constraints of the extraordinary circumstances we're in? Secondly, can you confirm that we are, relatively speaking, still not as badly off as some councils because of the record of yourself and your team at managing our finances carefully? And thirdly, can you confirm that a lot of very detailed work is going on to look at how we can address the shortfall between what we absolutely have to spend to provide our vitally important services, particularly the social care dimensions, which is mostly what we spend our money on going forward, and the shortfall in what central government actually allocates to us, and perhaps a supplementary. Can you confirm that it would be helpful for our council if central government gave us long-term sustainable and certain funding to enable us to deal with the challenges ahead? Thank you.
Leader, yes, I'm very happy to address those things. I can confirm that every effort is being done to control our spending, the team of finance business partners work very closely with directors and their teams, and are very well versed in challenging people about their spending plans. And I'm sure the directors will attest to that fact that there are some very strong conversations had about that, just to make sure that we are keeping ourselves on the financial straight and narrow. In terms of our position, we're nowhere near Section 114 notice. We entered this pandemic with a relatively sound financial position. If you recall back to the budget papers in February, we made that very clear, and also compared that to the analysis done about financial resilience. So we had the advantage of entering this phase with our finances under control, and we had a situation where we know where our adult social care position was on track to have an underspend, and we knew the challenges, and you'd agreed approach to deal with the challenges in children, so that transformation process, so that is standing us in good stead. So we are nowhere near a 114 notice, but there are councils that are sadly much closer to that cliff edge on that front. In terms of the work to look at where we spend our money, there is a lot of work that's ongoing at the moment to support the budget proposals that are coming through, and that is involving looking at where we spend our money, so that where we spend our money on things that you would describe as part of our social responsibility for dealing with people that have care needs and complex needs, that we provide that support to, as well as all the other things that we do as a council. So that work is, detailed work is ongoing, and it will come back to yourselves in Cabinet in due course as the budget proposals work their way through the system. They're on their way to scrutiny, and we do start the consultation next week, as you agreed in the timetable. In terms of the comment about the having a long-term view, I think it is helpful for every council to be able to have a clarity of what the future will hold, and in terms of that helping it make its long-term planning decisions on there. In terms of the announcement from the spending review yesterday, that was helpful to have clarity for the next year, but I'd echo your sentiments that for the years beyond that, it is difficult for the council to make long-term planning decisions without that clarity. But I think I also recognise that this is a very unusual situation the country finds itself in, and government is having to deal with things that are happening very rapidly, and it's having to making some very difficult choices on there.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just a quick one. I don't think it'd be right to do a delivery plan without thanking every single member of staff we've got an overspend, but we know what the overspend is about. We know what it's related to, and it's no indication on the amount of work that every single member of staff has done over this period. It can be a really lonely time being a local authority worker. There's quite a lot of the time unfair criticisms can be chucked at you, and I know that certainly yesterday's announcement about the public sector pay freeze may affect significantly your morale, but I wanted to say on behalf of, I'm sure, every single councillor, how appreciative we are of your absolute determination during all of the time of COVID. So I just wanted to give us extra special thanks to all the staff.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis. Well said. I'll move on then to comments from group leaders. Councillor Matthews.
Got me on the up there, Leader.
Sorry.
First of all, I'd like to note the comment by Councillor Harvey in the previous item about value for money and watching our expenditure. I'm sure she'll do that. It's very difficult times that we find ourselves in, and it's going to be a very difficult few years ahead of us. But I know that Mr. Lovegrove explained that group leaders the other day quite a bit of this to the group leaders, so we have been briefed on it. So we'll watch the situation very closely. Just one thing to emphasise my employment concerns, Leader. I'll just quote on page 123. A recent report by Grant Thornton for the County Council's network identified Herefordshire as one of the counties estimated to have experienced a greater than average decline in the gross value added GVA and classified 55.59% of employment in the county is currently at risk, compared to the national average of 48%, due to the high prevalence of the particular industries locally self-employed and workforce, etc. So, sorry, Councillor James, although we do supply a lot of foodstuffs, according to Grant Thornton, we're going to experience some extremely difficult times. So that's all I've got to say on it, Leader. We'll watch the situation, and if we can be useful to offer, we won't hesitate in putting it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. The report just highlights what an extraordinary time we've been going through up through till September, and I look forward to the ongoing budget discussions going into the next financial year. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Hardwick.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I don't think I've got too much to say on this one. I think we all realise what an extreme situation we're in. This has been caused by the COVID, and I think we're very fortunate that the finance team that we've got working for the council are very much up to speed and doing everything in their power to make sure that we keep on the straight and narrow with regards to finances.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Bohemian Rhapsody, Councillor James. You're going to burst into song. I'm expecting you to.
No.
You can't see a picture of yourself, can you?
Oh, I see what you mean now. I found that observation obscure until you mentioned it. I wondered where we were going.
It's a bad joke if it needs explanation, so carry on.
Sorry. Two things, just in response to Councillor Matthews, but I'd say that, you know, that's where figures tell the lie, that the percentage that we have in this county, a very high percentage of self-employed, but they tend to be in the agricultural and building and construction industries, which are probably more helpful in that it will be slightly safer in the future. But going back to one thing, I'd like to ask Councillor and Mr. Lovegrove about, you see the council write-offs. Earlier in the week, you mentioned that there are now some lagging in payments as far as council tax and business tax is concerned. And I realise that the figures produced are historic in this report. How serious, and bearing in mind, you know, the worst is probably yet to come, how serious is that drop in our collection rates at present?
Well, any reduction in collection rates, it has to be a cause of concern, because, you know, we are here to collect taxes, both the council tax and the business rate. We are seeing an increase in the number of people approaching the council for support, so the council tax support scheme, and also support for businesses on their business rates. We saw a significant increase in claims for the council tax support in August, and that was linked to when people's furlough arrangements were coming to an end. They have eased off, the rate of those have eased off in the last few months, and that's partly due to the current arrangements around the second furlough arrangement on there. But it does highlight that for a number of our residents, they are just about managing, I think is the phrase used, financially, and, you know, if wages are dropping or don't come in, then they have very little financial buffer, so they are approaching the council for support in there. And we're doing everything we can to help those families and those households through that process. We do have a range of arrangements in place, so the council tax support scheme, which council agrees every year, and there was additional funding provided by government for the people in that category, so they get the £150 provided for by government. So if you meet the criteria, you have nothing to pay for council tax on there. And for a large number of what I would describe are middle-sized businesses, so big enough that they didn't qualify for small business rates relief, but not the large ones. They're benefiting from the 12 months business rate holiday provided by government. So there are about 2,000 businesses in the county that have received that. So looking forward to future years, I think as the Chancellor predicted yesterday, there will be an ever increasing number of people who are unemployed, certainly until the middle of next year. So I'm expecting there will be an increase in people approaching the council for support. And ultimately, if the money isn't paid, then we will follow our normal processes of ultimately getting to marking those debts as unrecoverable and going through the formal write-off process, which you're seeing in front of you. And it is a historical look back. So we do, for a variety of reasons, do write small amounts of debt off.
Thank you, Mr. Lovegrove. Carrying on then to Councillor Lester.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to find my mute button there, unmute. But thank you. Yes, we note that we're very concerned about the overspend. We appreciate that COVID has caused huge financial pressures for everyone, businesses, the council, individuals, and these are very difficult times indeed. We do note that the government has awarded grants, and it's, from the report, it says it's expected to cover around 70% of the pressure. I have to respectfully take issue with Councillor Hitchener when you say that that is moderate help from the government. I think 70% is more than moderate, but we will wait to see what further help we get. With regard to paragraph 6 of the report, it says that the remainder of the pressures will be funded by the change in activity of the council in reducing costs and by reserves if required. So therefore, perhaps it's a question for Mr. Lovegrove. Can you be more explicit what you mean about that? What is it meant by change in activity of the council? Because I think it would help if the report was more clear on what it meant by that. And there's a second question related to that sentence, which is, it says about reserves and reliance on reserves. Is it possible to tell us how much in the way of reserves have we got to play with regard to coping with COVID? So there's two questions there. I have other questions, but perhaps if I pause there to ask Mr. Lovegrove to clarify those 2 points, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of paragraph 6, and what we're trying to convey in that paragraph is to make it clear that because of our response to COVID, a number of what you would describe as our business as usual services that the council does have changed, and we've redeployed staff into a range of other activities, and we did that during the first phase of lockdown. And as we're into this second phase, we've done that as well. And different teams have done different things because when we look back over the last 6 or 7 months, we had to be quite nimble and do things to react to pressures on there. So part of that is that the day-to-day activities have stopped. Some of those things have resulted in us being able to recharge the costs of those staff to various COVID or various grants. So that is helping our overall position as a council. And ultimately, any gap that we have will have to be met by our reserves. Now we have a general reserve we hold and a range of earmarked reserves. So, Leader, could I suggest that I provide a comprehensive written report outlining all of our reserves and positions rather than trying to regale them verbally to you? I'll make sure that that's done by the end of the week, so it's in the public domain as to where our reserves position. But to answer the question Councillor Lester was asking about what happens, the ultimate call on the pressure is to the general reserves and the earmarked reserves we hold. So we hold things like the Financial Resilience Reserve and earmarked reserves for specific things. So I'm comfortable that any shortfall that we have at the end of this year can be comfortably absorbed from within those reserves.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate those answers from Mr. Lovegrove, and I look forward to receiving that further report so that we can clarify just what funds we're dealing with. Just two quick questions. One is about the capital budget. It says there's a reduction in highway asset management by 2.2 million pounds. Could we just have a clarification as the reason for that? And then another question, and I suppose it's directed at Mr. Lovegrove, is it talks about an interest rate. I'm sorry, there is an interest rate now of only 0.16%. So is it still prudent to assume a budget rate of 0.5%? Technical questions, I know, but ones we would like answers to.
Mr. Lovegrove, yeah.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just trying to find the reference to the highways maintenance. I'll just find that. And
it's page 2 of the appendix 2.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of interest rates and in the detail that the Chancellor released yesterday, I don't think he actually mentioned it in his speech to the House. The government have revisited the rates that PWB are able to charge for councils, so they have reduced the rate that we can borrow money at. So that is one of the things that we will look at in terms of the budget that will be coming forward to Cabinet in due course, because clearly a reduction in the cost of borrowing will have an impact on any new borrowing the council takes on, because we can borrow at those lower rates. All our loans are on a fixed rate, so we're not able to ask for those to be retrospectively applied to the existing loan portfolio, and the arrangements with PWB that it's financially prohibitive to renegotiate those loans because they're designed to, the penalties are designed to discourage that type of activity. So have an impact on loans going forward. And I'm just finding the...
Yeah, I just want to take up the point about me suggesting the support from the government was modest at 70%. I seem to recall at the beginning of this crisis, the government told us to do whatever we needed to do to get around it. The implication being, I would have thought that the government would pay, and they ended up not having done so that we have to tighten our belt, do whatever necessary. I think anything less than 100% payment to us, I would say was moderate. But we can continue that debate some other time, I'm sure, Councillor Lester. So finally, Councillor Marsh.
Leader, sorry to cut in. Could Mr. Lovegrove send a copy of that report to all members, please?
Mr. Lovegrove, I think that would be...
yes, Leader, I'm very happy to do that. I will make sure that does go to all leaders. So that's a helpful suggestion on there.
I think Councillor Matthews is asking all members, is that right?
Just the group leaders will be fine, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Marsh.
Yes, thank you. I also was interested, like Councillor Matthews, in the Grant Thornton work, and I hope we may be able to get a little bit more detail about whether we'll be losing the more well-paid jobs, and I would certainly hope that we won't be in a position where we will be left mainly with the lowest paid and precarious jobs. So I would welcome a bit more information about that useful report. I note that we have had 69 million coming into the county for businesses and 12.5 million to the council, which I suppose just highlights the enormous scale of what we have been experiencing and the changes. And I'd just like to draw attention to paragraph 36, which makes it quite clear just how intimately involved with each other the working of the NHS and the working of social care are, that unless social care is right there, ready to take discharges, the NHS will inevitably not be able to process and work in the most efficient way. And that paragraph to me exemplifies why I'm so disappointed about the freeze to key workers in the sector, and hope very much that there may be time for that to be reconsidered, because like Councillor Davis, I know the morale of our staff is so important, and they have worked so hard during this whole difficult period. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, I don't know whether there are any recommendations. I don't think there were. I didn't pick up anything. So I think I just go to the recommendation, which is the Cabinet review performance and financial outturn for Q2 2020-21 as set out in appendices 1 to 8 and identifies any additional actions to be considered to achieve future improvements. So if we could again go through the voting procedure for that. Thank you. Shall we skip? Oh, no.
So, Leader, yeah, you've got eight members still, and they may vote now. All votes are in, and the results are unanimously in favour to approve those recommendations.
Thank you.
Leader, I'll have to go at 5:30 today. I've got another meeting.
Thank you. So that resolution the recommendation was accepted. So we now move on to the next item, which is town plan accelerated funding. Hopefully this one we can deal with fairly rapidly. Is reporting on this.
Leader, this is my item.
This is one for you, Ellie. Yeah.
Councillor Charles, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And I think we've been joined by Nick Webster and Roger Allenby from the Economic Development Team. In the interest of time, I will not summarise. You've had a chance to see. So this is £750,000 of funding for us to spend within the framework of the Towns Fund, which is a very exciting opportunity. We're pulling together an application for 25 million. This is immediate stuff. It needs to be spent by end of March. And there are 5 projects that are proposed. Cycle lane, expansion of barrel bikes and e-bikes, greening the city, improvements in Maylords, and improvements to the Castle Green Pavilion. I warmly commend it to you, and perhaps we just move straight to Q&A.
Anybody any question? Gemma, Councillor Davis.
Not really a question, but just for a bit of clarification. Could you just confirm about that the money is to be spent on Maylords, because I imagine people will be interested, is to cover mostly the cost of refurbishing the toilets, which have been campaigned for being reopened?
Absolutely, Gemma, yeah. Sorry, Nick, would you like to?
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Davis, I can confirm that majority of that 100,000 is spent on the toilets, yeah, and we'll bring them back into use.
Brilliant news, thank you.
And of course, that will help to drive footfall and improve quality of life for everybody using our town centre.
Councillor Harvey.
I just wanted to say how good it is to see the contraflow in St Owen's Street finally coming forward. Seems like a really long time since that was consulted on, and it'll be good to see it happen.
Yes, one of the pleasing things I think about this is it's not match funding, it's all 100% to us, so we just need to get on with it. So we will get on with it by going around. I do this in alphabetical order, so Councillor Matthews, you'll be at the end this time. Councillor Selden.
That's not alphabetical, Leader.
Yeah, well, I gradually goes down. Starts off at the top and then gradually.
Oh, okay.
That's the logic.
Yeah, I think everything's just about been said. We welcome the funding. We recognise that there is part of the development fund for Hereford City, and yes, just get on with it and let's get it done by March.
Councillor Hardwick.
Yeah, I would echo that. Welcome to receive the funds, and as Councillor Selden said, let's just get on and spend and get it done before March.
Councillor James.
Ditto. Sorry.
Councillor Lester.
Thank you. We really welcome the extra government funding. I would like to thank them for it. It's a great opportunity to invest in Hereford City. We note that some of the funding is going towards Maylords, and seeing as the council's purchased the freehold, we trust that the extra cash will be used to maximise the returns that the council will gain from its investment. Thank you.
Are you suggesting we should be charging for use of the toilets?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
No, I wasn't suggesting that at all.
Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, well, it's gifted to us. Grab it and get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Marsh.
Well, just being very glad that there is a arts, culture and heritage theme running through this that we've been able to take advantage of.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so I'll put this one to the vote again. So recommendation that £750,000 funded from government for the Towns Fund accelerated projects be accepted. B, the spending of £750,000 funded from government on the Towns Fund accelerated projects as detailed within this report is approved. And C, the Director of EMP be authorised to take all operational decisions, including but limited to the procurement and commissioning of new projects, and following consultation with the Section 151 officer, the movement of budgets between projects to ensure full expenditure funding. Thank you. All in favour? Gesundheit.
Leader, we have 8 members that are eligible to vote, and they may vote now.
Does anybody else do it really fast, just to see how quick you can do it? Yeah.
And again, those recommendations have been approved unanimously.
Right, well, that was approved. So Nick, you can get your shovels ready. You're not here anymore. No, Roger's here. So moving rapidly on to the last item, option delivery of council-owned affordable housing. This is part of the strategy. I just would be interested for confirmation whether we are voting for just one of the options in recommendation A today, or whether we're just recommending that those are the options and we'll decide later. Claire, are you able to confirm, or Ange, which of those it is the case?
Thank you, Leader. We are voting on recommendation A in terms of which one we'll be using, whether we do the general fund and then establish a HRA. But I'll go through this with my report anyway, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion with that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, carry on.
Okay. Before I introduce the report, Leader, I'd just like to bring to members' attention there's a typo error at paragraph 36. It should state 91k instead of 71 from the DRP capital budget. So there's a typo there to start. Okay, that's noted. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the report to approve the council's approach to the housing model options to increase our supply of affordable housing in the county. Cabinet is also requested to approve phase 2 of the strategic work to develop a pipeline of sites suitable for development as affordable housing to support discussions with key partners such as Homes England as set out under our recommendations A to E of the said report. As we know, the housing market is not delivering a choice of smaller and affordable new homes to meet the housing needs of the Herefordshire population, especially the younger population who are unable to remain living in our local communities. This lack of housing availability and choice raises house prices and creates barriers for vulnerable residents and its growing population of older people to secure suitable, affordable homes that can be adapted to meet their needs. The council has now engaged with NG Regeneration and Alt Consultancy to review the role council should play in delivering affordable housing in the county. ARC presented to Cabinet members options available for council to consider development of affordable homes. Their analysis considers the provision of affordable housing in two parts. The one part is the option for the council to either own direct or be involved in a structure that owns affordable units and engage with other partners and for them to deliver and own affordable units. Now, our council's ambition is to develop a portfolio of new council-owned housing of up to 1,000 units in a 4-year period. Our initial discussions with Homes England have been very well received for the council. The fact that the council is a significant landowner with partners already procured and who can deliver quickly is attractive to Homes England. However, our council has developed a pipeline of deliverable schemes. If the council wished to retain ownership of completed affordable units, the option of achieving this is the establishment of housing revenue account. However, there are risks associated with these options, as outlined in paragraph 43. Nonetheless, providing a pipeline of developable sites at an early stage, engage with Homes England and registered partners, we should hopefully mitigate such high risks. It is one of the biggest decisions the council will make, but it's one that will meet our county plan aims of providing generally affordable homes for local people to afford their accommodation. And I think that's one of our worries, that our people aren't affording accommodation. They live in homes that meet zero carbon targets, reducing fuel poverty and creating healthy, green living environments for everybody throughout Herefordshire. That's just a summary of the report, Leader. I'd like to hand over to Andrew now to add any further comments and open up to questions. Many thanks.
Thank you, Leader. I've nothing further to say. I think Councillor Tyler's given a very comprehensive introduction to the paper. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, over to you all for any general questions. So, Andrew, do you have a particular preference of the options which we've got open to us in option in A? There are 4 different ways of doing that.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of the ease of making things happen, I'm option I, the first one with the small italic I, is, as Councillor Tyler said, doing it through the general fund and then getting to a HRA once we have 199 units, I think is the most efficient way of doing that. And it also meets your aspiration of retaining the ownership of those properties. So on those criteria, I think option I is the best fit for your aspirations.
And leaves us with the maximum flexibility, I think, going forward. So, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, really excited to see this finally coming through. It's been an ambition of the administration and a lot of councillors before this for this to happen. I was one of those people that couldn't afford to get onto the ladder. As a intersectional feminist, it drove me mad that the only reason I've got on the housing ladder is because my husband's got the house. So I was a local person and I was renting, and the rent was so expensive that I actually couldn't raise the deposit. And that's where I think a lot of Herefordians are in that same position. So you either stay at home with your mum, dad, your stepmom and dad, your foster parents, you stay with them, save as much money and then move out. This will provide people with other options. And I suppose one question that if I was somebody in the public, I would say, why on earth are we as a council having to step in? And Councillor Tyler, I don't know if you can explain that for people that may not understand why we are proposing to go into social housing rather than housing developers fulfilling that need. So I wondered if you could just, I know you've given a little bit, but just explain the differences between them. That'd be really grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Yes, I think we've known for some time now in the housing delivery that many people, whether they're young people or elderly people or people want to downsize, there is no general housing support there to be able to provide that accommodation. There is many house builders that look at the different sightings of land for land development and have the better value from it. So affordable housing is sometimes delivered through Section 106, but whether we meet that need, general need for people who can afford these homes, we are missing that opportunity. And I think this is why we lose our young people to other areas. They don't stay because they are outsourced from local areas, and especially in our rurality communities, because they can't afford to stay there. So this is why the council has to intervene with the housing delivery and make sure we keep our young people, we look after our vulnerable adults and other parts of our community that can't afford to stay at home in Herefordshire.
Thank you. Councillor Chowns.
Thank you. I'm immensely excited about this project, like Councillor Davies and Councillor Tyler, and congratulations, and to you and to all the team involved in bringing it forward to this stage. I think you've outlined really clearly exactly what a problem we face here in Herefordshire. We've got a particular problem with housing affordability, particularly here in Herefordshire, a particular problem with fuel poverty in Herefordshire, and so we're going to address both of those issues and more with this project. It's super important. I'm really glad to see that we've got written into there a recommendation about getting the expert advice we need to ensure that this building project is compatible with our net zero carbon council goals. And before anybody jumps in with kind of completely spurious figures about what that might cost, I just want to remind us all that Exeter have been doing this for more than 10 years, that Norwich, that York, many councils have done this with, you know, very large scale development. Wolverhampton currently with a smaller scale development. There's loads and loads of experience, and we are learning from this across the country. And in terms of the uplift, what we're looking at these days in terms of the extra cost of doing, say, passive house standard housing is roughly 4% uplift on costs. And that, of course, is repaid over the lifetime of the housing in terms of the benefit and making it more affordable for the people living in it. So we're not just doing stuff that's good for the environment, we're doing stuff that is good for making the housing more affordable for the people living in it as well. So I think this is a project that is totally the right thing to do for the people of Herefordshire, and I'm super positive about it. Sorry, that wasn't a question, but there you go.
No, that's great, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, this is fab. You know, everyone who's been elected as an IOC councillor stood on a manifesto, this right at the top of it as something that we really wanted to see achieved in the county. Yeah, we know we've got low wages, we know we've got high house prices, but also this is about delivering quality homes, and you know, with the best will in the world, commercial property developers do not build the best quality houses for the social and affordable houses that we as a council make them build as a percentage of the big housing sites that they develop. It just doesn't happen. So what we want to make sure is that these houses are not only affordable to buy or to rent, but also affordable to live in throughout their lives. So good energy standards, built for life, so wide enough doorways for people if they get old and they need to have assisted mobility in their homes, that they can still move around their homes. You know, built the right way round so that they can have solar panels on the roofs and solar thermal heating tubes up there. You know, this is the sort of housing that we want to be proud of, and, you know, are the kind of homes that, you know, Herefordshire people deserve. You know, and I'm really, really proud of this administration for bringing this forward. This is exciting, you know, for as long as we own these homes, and I hope it's for a really long time. You know, they will be delivering value to the people who live there and to us as the owners. If and when they eventually get sold, they'll return funding to us, and we can do it all over again. Homes England are behind us on this. I hope local communities are. I really encourage neighbourhood planning groups to be thinking about whether they would like small developments of these houses built in their communities so that local people can afford to grow up and carry on living in the villages that they call home. And I really hope that everybody supports this and we can start to make it happen quickly.
Thank you. I don't know whether anybody's been watching a television programme about Cornwall on a Sunday evening, but the housing is a real problem down there with second homes, house prices being pushed up. Local people just can't possibly afford them. And Herefordshire as a county is becoming more popular. House prices have, I'm told, gone up in some areas. So it's becoming harder and harder for local people to buy houses. And we don't really want to be going the same way as Cornwall. Now is a great opportunity to do it and encourage people to stay in the area. So I'm very much, this is a great move. Any other thoughts from anybody? Shall I move on? We've got 7 minutes before I'm supposed to say, do you want to carry on or not? So let's see what we can do. I'll start this time. Where did I get to? I think John Hardwick, you're the first one.
Well, thank you. Yeah, a very good initiative, this. And I think the comment that I'll make is that if the government white paper on planning comes to fruition, where sites with affordable housing would only be needed to be supplied with sites over 40 or 50 units, it makes it even more essential that the council push ahead with this one. We've got a situation in our own village now where there's only one property on the market now. Everything else has been sold, and that property is priced at 1.35 million. So yeah, fully supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Councillor James.
Thank you. It's something I can wholeheartedly support. I'm glad you've not gone down the road of a partnership with, at this stage, with a housing association, because I have grave reservations about the way in which housing associations now operate, not only nationally but in this county as a whole. You know, I think we need to retain control. I wholeheartedly support this. I hope we'll retain the control of these particular housing as and when they are built. I have to say that the only caveat not caveat, but my concern is central government, because we were able to do this 30, 40 years ago. Now we're only because for political reasons was that stopped, and we weren't able to do that. And you know, we thought when Mr. Blair became Prime Minister, we might return to those days. Quite the reverse. He was even more determined for us not to control or manage housing within our communities.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Lester.
Thank you. We definitely agree that there needs to be more affordable homes, definitely, and there needs to be action taken to bring this about, but we do not agree that it's time to go back to the days where housing services are owned or run by the council. Firstly, there's the problem of the burden of such a financial responsibility. Increasing the debt burden for the council is surely not the way to go. It's certainly not the direction to take in a recession. And when the country is indeed gripped by the economic challenges. But even with that aside, the long-term commitment taken on behalf of the taxpayer will be surely a burden that this council will find is far beyond its means. At the time when this council's overspent in its budgets, with the prospect of having to find huge savings, it just doesn't add up to be spending even more money on reports that will just laden the council with such debt. The direction of travel for councils has been to streamline their focus, and that's just because the councils have needed to use their resources and focus them on key services that they must provide. And to take on this burden of responsibility, we think is just a step too far. We could understand if the need to explore building homes was a necessity because there aren't others to provide them. However, there are, and we believe that it'd be far better to work with housing associations and housing providers to provide the housing growth that we need. We can certainly do that. But the point, one of the key points is that housing associations, they have to look after their tenants and maintain their properties. But housing associations don't have to fix the roads or provide social services or a whole host of obligations that any local authority has to provide. So, you know, the solution surely has to be not to reinvent the wheel, but to really work with those existing house providers to achieve the council's aims. That people, they won't mind who the landlord is so long as it's a good quality home, and we can do much to ensure that. But they will object to higher council tax if the council's having to raise its taxes because it's saddled with an unsustainable debt and an unmanageable drain on council services. So the aspiration of affordable homes, yes, absolutely, but to take on the responsibility of building them and running them, we would really urge you to think again. Thank you.
I'll just defer now to the monitoring officer. Claire, do I just ask for a vote to continue this discussion?
Yes, you're just at your 3 hours allotted time. You do have a choice to defer, but I would suggest that we just extend the time today.
Is that agreed with everybody? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Chowns, you might want to respond to Councillor Lester. And then...
Try to be brief. I could probably say more, but I'm frankly very surprised to hear Mr. Lester's comments. He suggests that the market is working fine. If that is the case, why do we have the problem of housing affordability that we do have? It is clear that warm aspirations to have affordable homes don't just happen by themselves. And given that we've had Conservative government for more than 10 years, given that we've had Conservative administration in this council for quite a long time as well, nothing has been done, or nothing effective has been done to solve the housing crisis, then it's clear that it is necessary for us to step in, and that is why we are doing it. On the question of borrowing, the borrowing costs are at historically extraordinarily low rates. I would argue that this is precisely the time to borrow, to build housing, to inject into the economy. We will create jobs building those houses, in addition to creating the houses that will be more affordable for people to live in. So it is exactly the right thing to be doing at a time of an unprecedented recession, to be investing in the economy. And indeed, that is precisely the point that his Chancellor and his Prime Minister were making yesterday, and have been making for the last 9 months, about the importance of infrastructure investment. So I find his comments completely incompatible with those of the leadership of his party. So I completely disagree with him. This is absolutely the right time. And in fact, we are doing the most responsible thing possible by investing in this housing and stimulating the construction market in this way. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm quite surprised as well, Councillor Lester's comments in terms of not delivering affordable homes for the county. The government has been going build, 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 and they've even recognised the need that there isn't enough affordable homes being delivered across the whole country. So we are stepping in to support that government response, but as well as, you know, identifying the fact that we have got many residents who can't afford to buy their own home. We want to enable them to do this. We want to share our aspirations, bring jobs back in, use local builders, everything local, to even incorporate more things to our social value. But, you know, with a HRA account, if I could just remind members as well, the reason we have a HRA account is that all the funds that we have from the rents will come back into that HRA account, and it will pay for maintenance as well as the staff running it. But we have to decide that on our business case going forward when that comes back to us next week. But I am very disappointed to hear the comments of Councillor Lester and the fact that we have got a gap in our housing delivery in Herefordshire. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm going to sort of pile in on Councillor Lester as well. Sorry. It's just there's a couple of points here. I mean, the first point is that it makes very good economic sense to have assets, to buy them at to borrow the money at low cost, to produce an asset that's going to provide a service and also provide an income to the county at a time where we are severely depleted in what we get from the government, especially through our complete reduction of, you know, the rural grants that we were used to. And the other issue is that this idea that you can only be one thing or another in terms of the way that you operate markets or operate society. The very best Conservative administrations that I admired supported council houses because they appreciated that there was a market both for the free market and also responsibility to look after those who were unable to get onto the markets in the same way. And so this idea of mixed capital market is a perfectly acceptable and sensible choice. And actually, at the end of the day, it comes down to political choices. If people live in a world where they would like the opportunity to make money and to advance themselves, but also we look after the people who need that hand up, especially the young and vulnerable, then that's the choice you make. And I certainly support this. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to do something really different. Well, actually not that different, as Councillor Chown said, but something really special in Herefordshire.
Councillor Norman.
Yes, thank you. I won't repeat all the points that have already been made very eloquently, but just a couple of them. One is that clearly the market has not delivered, and it's absolutely essential that we do step up and do what we can to ensure that housing is available, is produced and available. And the second point somebody made, I can't remember who, is this is the best time to do it. Interest rates are low, and it's absolutely the right time to, you know, to be making that investment and to be building on that opportunity, which may or may not be there in the future. So totally behind this, very, very supportive.
Councillor James, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that I hope we would use local building firms. I mean, one of the problems with using housing associations, and I've had it in my area, is that the actual builders that come and do the work are not from the Herefordshire. They provide jobs for people in Birmingham, Cardiff, everywhere, but not for local people. And I do think that this is an opportunity to actually create jobs in Herefordshire.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good point there, Councillor James. I'm going to move on to the questions from the other group leaders and then a wrap up at the end. So we're up to Councillor Marsh. You have to go, Councillor Lester, or did you wanted to respond to?
Well, it was just that Councillor James came back, and so I was just wondering if I could come back and clarify that no one is saying that we don't need these homes. No one is saying that if we had homes, it would stimulate the economy. And no one is saying that, I'm certainly not saying on behalf of my group, that we don't need affordable homes and good quality affordable homes. I said that initially, and I'll say it again. But the point is how you bring that about. And the point is there are very many ways of bringing that about without necessarily involving the council with all of the issues that I've raised. So, you know, it's not about not stimulating the economy. It's not about not providing affordable homes. It's how you go about it that matters. And there's the danger if it's the council that does it, it stretches itself beyond its means when there are other ways to achieve that objective. That's the point I was making.
Okay.
Well, after 10 years of Conservative government,
we're going to move on to Councillor Marsh.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm delighted that that the Green Group would prefer option 1, and so I'm very pleased that our Financial Officer Andrew Lovegrove has also expressed support for option 1, and indeed feels that it is affordable. And I'm very aware that the housing associations in this county now cover vast geographical areas and often can offer only very minimal support. So we would like to suggest it is a good moment to keep them in-house as a starting at least. And as has been said so eloquently, it is, there has never been well, maybe not never, but really very rarely been a cheaper time to borrow money and to be able to get all these positive outcomes to do with jobs, job creation, energy saving, and homes for those who need them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. It all sounds too good to be true. First of all, I've looked at the answer has been given now, but other authorities have been successful elsewhere. That's one point I was going to ask. You've confirmed that. The other thing is the council land being used, would that be given as free? So there would be no cost involved there. If Angela Tyler could confirm that. And also, has the planning team been involved in the preparation of this scheme?
Councillor Tyler, are you able to respond to those?
I'd rather direct that to Andrew, Section 151 Officer Leader. We haven't been involved with planning yet at the moment, Councillor Matthews, because this is just the early stages. Our next paper will bring the developable sites, the pipeline sites forward, which will come to Cabinet. I believe it's the 3rd of December. So that'll be the next paper to agree what sites will come forward. But I believe it will be on our own council land sites.
Leader, I'm happy to add to that comment. In terms of the land, because we will own the houses and we will own the land, we won't be able to, we're in effect building on our own land, so we can't give the land to ourselves. So there is no cost for acquiring land because it's already in our ownership on there. And as Councillor Tyler said, in terms of this is the first step in that process. So this is the Cabinet being asked to agree the principle of building the houses. There will be further papers coming to Cabinet, and it says in the paper, and you're going to see a lot of papers in the coming months about housing on there, and at the appropriate time there will be engagement with the planning department about sites as they start to come through on the pipeline.
Leader, if you could, as Councillor James made a very valid point, if it's at all possible, local builders should be used to keep the employment within the county. So bearing that in mind, I wish you well, and I'll be closely monitoring to see how it goes. Thank you.
Most definitely, Councillor Matthews.
Yes. Yeah. And finally, Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. As Councillor Harvey said, everybody at IOC is really excited by this. And it's worth noting that the only time in the last 75 years that housing targets have been met in this country is when councils were allowed to build, own and run their own housing stock. I forgot what I was going to say now. Yeah, it's clear that the current registered social landlords have failed in maintaining their properties, because that's evident by the waiting time. Some people are having to have country for maintenance, basic maintenance to their properties, and the building standards just aren't that good on some of these properties. In fact, some of them are now beginning to deteriorate to such a degree that we probably need rebuilding and an awful lot of money spending on them. So we thoroughly recommend this paper to everybody. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, well, I'm going to put to the vote. I think we can get that straight away. The recommendation then is that we proceed with option Roman little-1, that the council own the affordable units initially under the general fund and then establish an HRA.
Yeah.
2, approves to spend up to £72,000 on the development of the housing model chosen by developing a full business case. C, ask NG to develop recommendations for proceedable sites to be reviewed at Cabinet in December 2020. And D, approve the spending of £71,000 to develop recommendations for potential sites to be reviewed at Cabinet in January 2021 to agree how to progress affordable housing delivery in Herefordshire. And finally, E, appoint an expert, an independent expert within a budget of £20,000 to advise on ensuring that housing build through this programme is compatible with our commitment to being a net zero carbon council by 2030. So we can vote on that in the usual way.
And the voting number is still 8, Leader, and you may vote now. All votes are in, and that was unanimously approved for those recommendations.
Well done, Ange.
Okay, so that recommendation's also been passed. So I'll draw the meeting to a close in a moment. First of all, just to remind everyone, there's a meeting next week on Tuesday, which is in the evening with a shorter agenda, but have the mineral and waste item on it, which is a very long paper. So that might take a little bit longer. And then we meet again on Thursday. So my apologies that you've got two more meetings next week. Lots happening. We've thanked the officers for their extraordinary hard work in the current environment. I wanted to thank the Cabinet for their amazing support and hard work from everybody on all these efforts. Just thank you all for attending, not just Cabinets, but everybody else, all the group leaders for coming in to these events as well. Thank you very much. And we move on. With COVID continuing to influence, but we're doing lots of other things to try to emerge from this crisis. Thank you very much. Could you bring the